Chapter 195. Of course, Baizeo wouldn't believe what Lo Huainan had just said. If he could get out of here alive, he would probably make up a particularly beautiful story that would move anyone who heard it and make them shed tears like rain. But he would never tell anyone where he was. He would hope that he would die here, unable to tell anyone this secret. Oh no, perhaps after he had recovered some of his power, he would personally kill her before he left. Having thought this, she calmed down, but she felt very apologetic toward Jingjiu, who had accompanied her here. Seeing her expression, Lo Huainan knew what she was thinking. "No matter what you think, you are my most beloved junior sister," she said. "I won't kill you." "Is that so?" Baizeo asked with a smile. Perhaps provoked by the mockery in her smile, Lo Huainan's expression turned cold. "Perhaps I can't be considered a pure good person, but I really do adhere to the path of Xianxia. When Tong Lu was in danger, it was I who saved him. Otherwise, how could I have fallen into such a dangerous situation? Junior sister, you really have to believe me." Baizeo looked at her in silence. Lo Huainan gradually fell silent. She took out an elixir and swallowed it, beginning to regulate her breathing and dissolve its power. Baizeo asked, "In the long life of cultivation from now on, can you convince yourself?" For a cultivation sect of the orthodox path like Zhongzhou school, it was very important for one's Tao heart not to be swayed. "Perhaps everything I've said is true, that I have the courage and will to sacrifice for the orthodox path, and I've already proved this point, but, looking at the corpse of the snow worm, Lo Huainan said after a moment of silence, "I didn't expect that after being swallowed by this snow worm, I didn't die immediately, and that it actually brought me here. Death was right in front of me, but it refused to show its true face. The process was so long, and I don't want to experience that again." "A long life of cultivation?" "No, after this experience, I don't think there's anything longer than this." Baizeo said, "So your courage and willpower have been worn down." Lo Huainan looked at her and said seriously, "Yes, I don't want to die. I still have a lot of things to do, a lot of scenery to see. In the belly of the snow worm, I swore to myself that if I could survive, I would live at all costs." "I believe what you said," said Baizeo. "It's because I received your distress signal a bit late." For Lo Huainan, getting her approval seemed to be a very important thing, and her expression became a little more relaxed. "Junior sister, I am very grateful that you came to save me, but I know that if there is only one choice in the end, you will definitely not sacrifice yourself to let me live. So you decided to snatch the 10,000-mile seal from me." Baizeo looked at him and said, "If we don't talk about you and me, do you think you're worthy of my parents?" After a moment of silence, Lo Huainan said, "Master and Mastress have been very kind to me, right? Then why did you bring a magic treasure like the 10,000-mile seal with you when you participated in the cultivation tournament, while I have participated in so many cultivation tournaments, but I have never taken one? If the cultivation tournament is a test of life and death, why can you stay out of it? Why should I be the one to die? After all, there is a difference between those who are close to me and those who are distant. They treated me coldly, so don't blame me for being cruel." Baizeo was very angry and said, "Don't you feel guilty saying such things?" Lo Huainan said with an indifferent expression, "Master and Mastress have fought for a lifetime, until we are in this generation. Master wants me to marry you, and Mastress wants Tong Yen to marry you. To be able to marry a woman like you, no matter how you look at it, is the best thing. Then do you know why Tong Yen and I didn't agree immediately? Because we all know that Master and Mastress just want to find a cultivation partner for you, a sickly person, to help you make up for the inborn debt. No matter how hard Tong Yen and I cultivate, it is just a wedding gown for you." Hearing this, Baizeo was a little startled. She really didn't know about this. Tong Yen is the smartest guy in the world. How could he not see it? So he thought of a very clever way, which is to use me as an excuse. Lo Huainan smiled bitterly and said, He retreated so quickly, so where could I retreat to? I had to make a great wish that after I reached the cultivation state, I would come to the snowland to watch the night for the human race, and become the second broadsword saint. Who would be willing to stay in the snowland for hundreds of years like that idiot? It was just a choice I had to make to avoid this marriage. I wanted to see how Tong Yen could retreat, but I didn't expect this matter to bring me a lot of fame. Bai Zhao was silent and didn't say anything. But it's good now. I probably don't have to come to the north anymore. Lo Huainan didn't finish her words. If Bai Zhao died here, he naturally didn't have to come to the snowland to avoid this marriage and imitate the broadsword saint. What about the great wish you once made? The whole cultivation world knows about it. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? Bai Zhao said, looking into his eyes. Lo Huainan said, time can make people forget all their promises, and what is said to others is not important, just like what you once said to me, Tong Yen and Nanshan. The future of the human race, the threat of the snowy kingdom, the peace of the underworld, the conservatism of the elders, these are just the imagination of a little girl. Do you really think I believe what you said and am willing to help you lead the younger generation of cultivation practitioners to accomplish the great cause that all the predecessors couldn't accomplish? So what you said before was all false. Of course it was false. I just played with you for a while because you like me and respect me. Just like when we played house when we were young. Lo Huainan said after a moment of silence, I was much older than you. At that time, it was Tong Yen who played with you most of the time. Bai Zhao raised his head proudly like a princess and said, I did respect you before, but you are wrong about one thing. I have never liked you. Lo Huainan smiled and didn't say anything. Just like the big brother on the Cloud Dream Mountain, who looked at his little sister who lied out of anger with a doting expression. Bai Zhao continued, the one I like is Jingjiu. Even big brother Tong Yen is much better than you. I know you are not happy at this time, but you don't have to make yourself suffer. Lo Huainan raised her eyebrows slightly and said, that disciple of Aoyama named Jingjiu is nothing. What makes him qualified for you to use as an excuse? Bai Zhao said with a smile, I am telling the truth. It is because you are really not good-looking. Lo Huainan was the strongest of the young generation in the orthodox cultivation world. He was tall, majestic, and had an extraordinary temperament. But his appearance was not good-looking. He was just ordinary. Tong Yen was born with a childish face and eyes as white as snow, far better than him. Not to mention Jingjiu. Little sister, you are really amazing. Lo Huainan forcibly suppressed the anger in her heart and said indifferently, under such circumstances, you can still easily irritate me. I am not lying. Jingjiu and I are really in love. Otherwise, how could I come to the cold north by myself? He did not hesitate to consume Zhen Yuan and destroyed several magic weapons of Aoyama to send me here. As she spoke, Bai Zhao's face was full of tenderness. It was very real and definitely not fake, because that was what she thought in her heart. Lo Huainan was startled and said with a slightly cold expression, Is that so? Then where is he? Bai Zhao said, We encountered a snow worm. It was not convenient for him to bring me to fight, so he sent me into the cave first and then went to fight with the snow worm. I think he will be there in a moment. If she did not say this, Lo Huainan might have believed her a little, but now she judged that she was lying and said, In that case, I have to hurry. Having said this, he closed his eyes and began to adjust his breath. Bai Zhao also closed his eyes. She did not intend to use Jingjiu to scare him. She just wanted to plant a trace of doubt in his Taoist heart and at the same time, not to let him pay too much attention to her. Lo Huainan must have suffered a great injury in the belly of the snow worm. She used Zhen Yuan for a long time in the sneak attack. If she wanted to recover to the state where she could use the seal of 10,000 miles, it would take some time. Moreover, he did not know that she had mastered the hidden scroll. In this case, she might really recover faster. The chill seeped through the collapsed stones and came to the cave. The Namping bell and the North Time bell lay on the ground in silence. Time passed slowly. Her eyelashes blinked and frost fell. Lo Huainan opened her eyes, stood up and walked to Bai Zhao. I did not expect that you have mastered the hidden scroll. Bai Zhao opened his eyes. He looked a little tired, as if he had given up. Among the 17 mysteries of Zhongzhou school, the hidden scroll was a higher-level Jindan method than the Chaoyuan formula. It was extremely difficult to practice, even more difficult than the escape method of heaven and earth. Lo Huainan said, "Sister, I don't want to humiliate you. Hand it over yourself." They were both disciples of Zhongzhou school. Even if Bai Zhao would rather die than hand over the seal of 10,000 miles, he still had a way to break her instrument, and it would be very cruel. Bai Zhao took out the seal of 10,000 miles and threw it to her. She did not expect that Lo Huainan had also mastered the hidden scroll, but she still did not give up hope. She did not reveal anything when she spoke before. Sure enough, Lo Huainan did not leave immediately. He flicked his sleeves and walked to the entrance of the cave. He looked out of the cliff. He thought that Bai Zhao was lying. But what if what she said was true? If the disciple of Aoyama named Jingjiu was really here, and if he could leave alive, what would he do? Looking at Lo Huainan's back, Bai Zhao's eyes turned cold. He was ready to mobilize the Zhen Yuan accumulated by the hidden scroll to launch the final attack. She did not think that she could defeat Lo Huainan. She only hoped to use the method of mutual destruction to bring her into the terrible snowstorm outside the cliff. All of a sudden, Luo Huainan uttered a faint "ah," seeming to be surprised. Bai Zhao thought of a possibility. He became nervous and could not attack anymore. A figure appeared on the cliff, climbing up slowly in the snowstorm. The snowstorm was like a knife, and the temperature was unimaginably low. The cliff was polished until it was smoother than ice. But the person's hand was still tightly attached to the cliff, and was not taken away by the great force of the snowstorm. As if he had sensed something, he lifted his head and looked up, staring at Luo Huainan quietly. Chapter 196. I'm sorry, Lo Huainan said. The bell of the North Time broke through the wind and snow like a stream of light. Jingjiu looked at Lo Huainan in silence. Such a sudden attack, such a sinister method, did not cause any change in his expression. His eyes were calm, without anger or despair, just a little tired. The stream of light fell in the wind and snow. There was a loud bang. The stone wall cracked. Seeing that the bell of the North Time was completely hit and Jingjiu fell into the snowstorm again, with no chance of survival, Lo Huainan turned around and walked into the cave. After staying outside the cave for a short time, his eyebrows were frozen. The movement of Zhen Yuan also became a little sluggish. He knew that he could not stay any longer. Sister, I had a fortuitous encounter in this cultivation tournament, so I really don't want to die. Thank you for saving me. I will definitely have a good future. After saying this to Bai Zhao, Lo Huainan activated the seal of 10,000 miles and left. She spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood on her white robe had just coagulated, and many more blood spots appeared. Just like the plum trees in the Nishiyama house, many new plum trees had been painted by the painters. Bai Zhao's Taoist heart was in a mess, and the Zhen Yuan that she had gathered with the hidden scripture dispersed. She walked to the entrance of the cave with difficulty, and looked at the wind and snow under the cliff. 2 lines of tears silently flowed down her cheeks, which instantly froze. What you need to do now is to rest, not cry. A voice came from the bottom of the cliff. There was no emotion in the voice, as if it was colder than the wind and snow. But to Bai Zhao the voice was so warm. Jingjiu reached out and picked her up like a child, walked into the cave, and stuffed her into the snow worm's body roughly. There was still a lot of sticky juice left in the snow worm, which wrapped her body and could prevent the cold from invading. His right hand brushed across the hard stone wall. Countless stones fell down like rain and jumped up, once again blocking the entrance of the cave. It was so tight that not even a trace of cold wind could seep in. Unlike Zhao Liu, Bai Zhao cared a lot about cleanliness. If she was soaked in the corpse fluid of the snow worms, she would feel disgusted even if she knew the reason. But at this moment she didn't feel that way at all, because she only had eyes for Jingjiu. Her line of sight followed Jingjiu, unwilling to move away for even a moment, as if she was in a daze. Jingjiu took out a pill and handed it to her. The pill was dark red in color and had an ordinary appearance. It had a unique spicy smell of mugwort. This was the Xian Chao pill. Back in Nanhezu's precious treehouse, Jingjiu had taken one out. This kind of pill contained an extremely strong fire nature, which could even dispel the coldness of the netherworld. It had a strong effect in refining and nourishing the golden elixir, so it was very precious. The most important thing was that the Xian Chao pill was produced in Zhongzhou's Xianhua Mountain. Bai Zhao was a disciple of Zhongzhou school, so the magic skill she cultivated was perfectly compatible with it. If it was in the past, Bai Zhao would have wondered why Jingjiu, a disciple of Aoyama, had her own pill. At least, she would have been curious. But at this time, she didn't ask anything. She directly opened her mouth and swallowed the Xian Chao pill. Bai Zhao's lips touched the tip of his finger. She was certain that he was alive, and that he wasn't a figment of her imagination. She finally felt relieved, and as soon as her spiritual awareness relaxed, she fell asleep. Her veil had fallen off during the battle, revealing her beautiful face. In her sleep, she looked even more delicate. Jingjiu looked at her with his sword discernment and saw a bright line appearing on the girl's neck. The Xian Chao pill had melted and was melting into her body. He was a little tired, so he sat down cross-legged and began to regulate his breath. It was too cold here. The chill penetrated into his bones. Even his Zhen Yuan was a little stagnant. Fortunately, his body was very special, so he didn't have to worry about being frozen to death. The main reason was that the consciousness that was more than 10,000 miles away had consumed too much of his Zhen Yuan and spirit. After being swallowed by the whirlpool of wind and snow, he didn't dare to ride his sword because he was afraid of alarming that distant existence again. He could only climb up the cliff with his bare hand. Because of the same reason, when Lo Huainan attacked him with the North Time Bell, he didn't fight back. He took it head-on, loosened his hands, and fell into the whirlpool of wind and snow again. Of course, it was very dangerous. If it were any other cultivator, they would definitely die. He fell down twice and climbed up twice. It was easy to get tired of it. He had lived twice and had to walk the same path of cultivation twice. It was really a little annoying. The tiredness also came from the matter itself. He didn't know why Lo Huainan attacked him, nor did he ask Bai Zhao. But with a little deduction, he could roughly guess the story. The human heart was sinister and selfish. There were too many such stories in the world. As long as you lived long enough, you would encounter them sooner or later. Anything would naturally become boring, tiring, and annoying if it was repeated too many times. So all those years, he only cultivated in Shenhua Peak and never met outsiders. After a long time, he finished regulating his breathing and opened his eyes. He used his sword discernment to check himself and confirmed that the sword pill was undamaged. The Dao tree was the same as before, but the speed of Zhen Yuan was 70% slower than usual. Bai Zhao also opened her eyes and woke up. The Xianchao pill's medicinal power had all entered her body, making her feel better. But this could only guarantee her temporary safety, and couldn't help her resist the bitter cold for a long time. The mucus in the snow worm's corpse would also be used up one day. What was more troublesome was that there were two extremely deep cracks on her jindan, and it could shatter at any time. Lo Huainan was really ruthless. Bai Zhao was silent. Forming the jindan was the most difficult stage of cultivation in Zhongzhou school, similar to the birth of the sword pill in the sword sect of Aoyama. Once the jindan was broken, it would be very difficult to form it again by cultivating again. Even if she was the only daughter of the sect master of Zhongzhou State and had countless herbs and elixirs to build her foundation, or could form the Jindan twice, it was almost impossible for her to have the same grade as before. In other words, she seemed to be able to see the end of her cultivation path. There was no wind in the cave, but the chill still passed through the stones and fell on her body. She was congenitally deficient, and now she was seriously injured. Invaded by the chill, her face became even paler. "I'm sorry to implicate you," Bai Zhao said softly, "but I think, since you can bring me here, you should also have a way to leave. I'm not sure. The chill of heaven and earth is stronger than before, and the Zhen Yuan is not running smoothly." Jingzhou said, "The connection between me and the flying sword may be cut off at any time." He didn't know when, but the iron sword had returned to his side and was held in his arms. He noticed that Bai Zhao didn't look good, so he had an idea. A sword flame emerged from the iron sword, illuminating the cave. It looked like a torch. The iron sword was burning in his arms, and the scene looked a little magical. The fire looked a little warm, but compared with the invasion of the cold outside, it was still too weak. The surface of the snow on the cave wall had just melted, but it quickly turned into solid ice. Looking at his pale face reflected on the ice, Bai Zhao made up his mind. "I can let you leave. Lo Huainan thinks I only have one seal of 10,000 miles, but I actually have another one." Chapter 197. Jingzhou caught it and looked at the jade-like object in his hand. He felt an ancient and distant aura coming from it, and his expression froze. When Lo Huainan left, he sensed that aura on the cliff under the wind and snow, and knew that it was a magic treasure of the spirit level. It was the 10,000-mile seal. Such a magic treasure of the spirit level was rare even in Aoyama. He didn't expect that the sect master of the central state would give it to his daughter, and both of them. Jingzhou looked at her and said, "If Lo Huainan knew, he wouldn't have attacked you. Yes, he will still be the kind, broad-minded, and loving big brother," Bai Zhao said calmly, "but he didn't expect that father and mother would give me one." One of the two 10,000-mile seals was originally prepared by her father for Lo Huainan. So even though she knew it was dangerous, she still came. She remembered the conversation she had with Lo Huainan. When she said there was one more person, she was referring to Jingzhou. Two 10,000-mile seals couldn't take 3 people away. She had already prepared to stay with Jingzhou. Lo Huainan thought she meant that there were 2 of us, but there was only one 10,000-mile seal. If he had acted a little later, even a little later, he would have heard Bai Zhao's words and understood what she meant, and the following things wouldn't have happened. Just like what Bai Zhao said, he should still be the eldest brother of Zhongzhou School who was loved and respected by everyone. Thinking of these things, Bai Zhao showed a bitter smile. Even now, he still felt it was ridiculous. Jingzhou didn't know what she was thinking, but he was curious why she took out the 10,000-mile seal. Wasn't she afraid that he would take it away? "You can use this to leave," Bai Zhao said. "My golden core is broken anyway, so I can't use it." Jingzhou finally understood what she meant. Cultivators took life and death more seriously than mortals. The longer one lived, the more one feared death. This was a common saying, but it was also the truth. The 10,000-mile seal represented a chance to live, but she gave it to him so calmly. After a moment of silence he said, "I won't die. You heal your wounds first." Bai Zhao didn't seem to hear him and said softly, "When you get out, tell my parents what happened here and ask them to kill Lo Huainan." Jingzhou thought to himself that there was no need for him to say anything. He was going to do it anyway. Bai Zhao suddenly asked, "Why didn't my parents come to save me?" The headmaster of Zhongzhou School and his wife were 2 of the most powerful figures in the cultivation world. Their realms were earth-shattering. How could the cold weather stop them? Jingzhou knew what she was thinking and said, "They naturally have their reasons for not appearing." He wasn't trying to comfort her, nor was he trying to find an excuse for the couple of Zhongzhou school. He had vaguely guessed the reason for the current situation. Bai Zhao was a bit sentimental, asking, "Do the cultivation practitioners really have to be unfeeling? You won't die anyway, so you don't have to think about it." Having said this, Jing Jiu inserted the burning iron sword in front of the corpse of the snow worm, got up, and walked to the edge of the cliff after dispersing the rocks blocking the entrance of the cave. He looked at the deep end of the wind and snow. 10,000 miles away. His opponent was extremely powerful, and he should be a being of the highest state in Chaotian or even all the lands. If the cultivation states of the Aoyama sect were to be classified, he would have broken through the heavenly arrival state a long time ago and achieved the hidden heaven state. To say nothing of the headmaster of Zhongzhou School and his wife, even his friend from the alien land couldn't defeat such a being. If he were in his previous life, he would only be able to fight to a draw with his opponent when he ascended. As for the current him, he was merely a tiny ant in his opponent's eyes. If he left by riding the sword, he would alert his opponent. It was fine if his opponent ignored him, but what if he was enraged? If this was the scheme of his big brother, he had to admit that it was a brilliant one. The assassination of Zhao Liu persuaded him to take part in the cultivation tournament. All these were part of his scheme. As long as Jing Jiu took part in the cultivation tournament, he would meet that being in the deep end of the wind and snow, either in his true body or his spirit. Though he was merely a tiny ant, he was the only one who had flown higher than that being in the world. His big brother had not only grasped his desire to change his cultivation in the next life, but he had also made use of the temperament of Zhao Liu, and even brought that being in the deep end of the wind and snow into this scheme. Such a scheme was worth appreciating. How could he overcome this scheme? Jingju sent a sword will toward the deep end of the wind and snow. This was an extremely risky move. Yet, he didn't know what else he could do besides negotiating. Few humans were qualified to negotiate with that being in the deep end of the wind and snow, not even the broadsword king in White Town. Yet, Jingju believed that his opponent would respond. Again, it was the same thing. Right now, he was just an ant, but he had still flown before, and he had flown higher than all other living beings. In the next moment, an indescribable pressure came from the far north. The wind and snow suddenly became chaotic. There was no thunder, but there seemed to be countless booming sounds in heaven and earth. Jingju's face turned extremely pale. It was a snowland outside White Town. The sky in the deep end of the snowland was filled with leaden clouds. Snowflakes could be seen falling into the thick, cotton-like fog and disappearing. Two extremely powerful energies appeared in the sky in the east and the south respectively. The clouds changed shape and took on all kinds of shape. The flying carriages that were descending swayed uneasily. The believers kneeling on the rugged mountain paths didn't dare to raise their heads. They looked terrified, chanting the scriptures in a trembling voice. Countless milky white rays of light shone through the clouds in the east, bringing with them a sense of warmth and subtlety. However, it started to rain in the clouds in the south. The cold rain turned into ice when it touched the ground. It was a very strange scene. The sect master of Zhongzhou School and Yuan Qijing had arrived. The two immortals in the heavenly arrival state came out to patrol. Heaven and earth changed color. The deep end of the snowland seemed to have sensed it, and the thunder-like booming sounds echoed in response. All of a sudden, a formidable broadsword energy shot up from White Town, traversing 100 miles in the sky and blocking all the paths. The intention of the broadsword king was clear. Nobody was allowed to enter the snowland at the moment, including the sect master of Zhongzhou School and Yuan Qijing. Sitting on the doorsill of the temple, Guodong looked at the peculiar phenomenon in the sky. Though her cultivation state was quite ordinary, she had a good eyesight. She knew that someone else had come in addition to the sect master of Zhongzhou School and Yuan Qijing. The slightly salty wind blew over from the back of the mountain. The godly swordsman Shilai should be somewhere, but it was unclear how far away he was. The lotus sedan of Zen Master should be not far away. So many figures in the heavenly arrival state rarely showed up in the world in decades had come. The peculiar phenomenon in the Snowy Kingdom was a significant event. The sect master of Zhongzhou School and Yuan Qijing wanted to enter the Snowland not only because they wanted to check out the situation, but also because of Bai Zhao and Jingjiu. 4 hours ago, Lo Huainan had successfully passed through the Snowland and returned to the Cloud Dream Mountain with the help of the 10,000-mile seal. Yet, he was severely wounded and passed out before he could say anything. That deep and feeble voice rang out behind Guodong. She is very sensitive right now, but she won't attack actively. But if people like you two enter the Snowland, she will regard them as a great threat, and she will kill you at all costs. The orthodox cultivation circle can't afford such a loss. It was unclear if that person was speaking to Guodong or the two figures in the heavenly arrival state in the sky. The two powerful energies in the sky calmed down because they believed that person's judgment. Chapter 198. Guodong let out a faint mocking smile. She did not like these people. They were not straightforward at all. Unlike Jingyang in the past, when he said he would do it, he even dared to stab his senior brother in the back with his sword. When he said he wouldn't do it, he would do it, even if his companions and friends died in front of him. He wouldn't bat an eyelid. She looked at the sky in the east and thought to herself, "You obviously don't want to go in, so why did you come here and put on a look of pity?" She then looked at the southern sky and thought to herself, "The person who wants the inheritance of Shinma Peak to end the most is probably you. Why did you come here and pretend to be worried about Jingjiu's whereabouts?" Jui City was located 900 miles to the south of White City. The headquarters of the Windy Broadsword Church was here, and it was many times more prosperous than White Town. The streets were full of sheep sellers and druggists, shouting and yelling ceaselessly. Of course, there would be hot pot restaurants in such a bustling city. A short and skinny old man and a handsome young man were eating hot pot. Mandarin duck pot. The red soup was already boiling, but the white soup was still very quiet, looking like the fog in the depths of the snowfield. The young man held a pair of long chopsticks and dipped the tripe in the red soup. His eyes were bright and he looked extremely happy. The short and skinny elder was the third-generation patriarch of the mysterious Yin sect. At this time, he was not in the mood to eat hot pot. He looked at the young man with a strange look and said, "Is it that delicious?" The young man ignored him. His right hand, which was holding the chopsticks, was extremely stable. From time to time, he would pick up the food and put it directly into his mouth. He didn't seem to feel that it was hot at all. The head of Zhongzhou School and Yuan Qijing are fine. One is at the Mahayana stage, and the other is at the heavenly arrival stage. I've also reached this stage in the past. The short, skinny old man narrowed his eyes as he looked into the distant north and said, "Why is this saber-chi able to make me want to retreat?" The young man picked up a piece of pig intestine from the red soup and threw it into his mouth, chewing noisily. He mumbled, "When you hid underground, he probably wasn't even born yet." The short and thin elder said, "Of course I know that he is the broadsword sage that people talk about." The young man picked up the earthen bowl and drank a mouthful of sour plum soup, sighing in satisfaction. "He is a Buddha that was raised from the wind and snow. He is innately at odds with your Tao." The short elder shook his head, pointing to the north and said, "What has happened in the snow country? Even I am a little shocked." The young man put down the bowl and picked up the hot towel on the table to wipe his face and casually said, "It's nothing serious. It's just that she's about to give birth." The short elder was shocked and said, "Ice Queen? She's an inhuman being, so how could she have a child?" The young man glanced at him and said, "You're really muddle-headed. Who said that only humans can have children? Didn't you see that the imperial concubine in the palace is also pregnant?" The short elder took a long time to get over the shock in his heart. He looked at him and asked, "How did you know about this?" The young man smiled and said, "I'm a scholar. Alright, I've lived for a long time, so I naturally know more things." The short and thin old man snapped, "I've lived for a long time too." The young man said, "Hiding underground, not seeing the sun all year round, not experiencing the affairs of the world, that is not called living, it is called enduring." "Alright, you're right." The short and thin old man looked at the young man and said with admiration, "You can even include such a being in your scheme. You're really amazing." The young man smiled and said, "It's just a coincidence. There's nothing amazing about it." The short and thin old man changed the topic and asked, "Do you really want that Jingjiu to die so badly? Even if he is the successor of your younger brother, why are you so vigilant? Or does he have some other background?" The young man knew that the great ancestor of the deviant sex had said so much nonsense just to ask this question. He smiled and did not explain. The short and thin old man narrowed his eyes and asked, "Or, even if Jingyang is dead, you're still afraid of him?" "Yes, I'm afraid of him because I can't see through him. Except for attaining the way and ascending, I never know what he wants or likes." The young man picked up a few green vegetables and was about to put them into the red soup. But after thinking for a while, he put them into the white soup, which had not yet started boiling, and continued, "When he was young, I asked him many times what color he liked and what kind of magic he liked, but I never got an answer. Many years ago, the first hot pot in Shanghai de Peak was the Yuanyang hot pot. He and his two evil disciples ate the red soup, and Jingyang ate the white soup. Later, it became plain water. It was tasteless, desireless, and extremely boring, but it had no weaknesses. If there was anyone in this world that he was most wary of, it would not be his two evil disciples, nor anyone else but Jingyang. The young man thought that he would not be at ease if Jingjiu was still alive. At the same time, he also wanted to confirm whether Jingjiu was Jingyang or not. He had been very sure about this, but now he had many doubts because of certain things. Everybody should have seen it. Jingjiu is an Aquarius, and Insan is a Scorpio. To the north of White Town, more than 10,000 miles away, was a truly white world. The ice and snow were everywhere. Even the sky was ashen. A snowy peak rose up from the snowland. It was unimaginably high, as if it would pierce through the sky. The peak was very close to the sky. The sunlight was extremely hot, but it was exceedingly cold, devoid of any heat. Even the red lava gushing out from the underground would be frozen into sand and pebbles as soon as it came into contact with the air here. In fact, the plain of 10,000 miles in front of the snowy peak was formed this way. There were no snow foot monsters, no snow worms, and no other living beings of the snowy kingdom here. It was deathly quiet. However, if one sensed it carefully, he or she would find a faint life force hidden in this extremely cold heaven and earth. The life force grew stronger and stronger, giving off a feeling of exuberance. Where did this life force, which was as fresh as a sprout in the spring and growing at an unimaginable speed, come from? The life force came from the deep end of this snowy peak. The oldest, strongest, and highest state being in Chaotian was right there. The consciousness that carried supreme pressure slowly swept across the boundless snowy plains. If she wanted to, her awareness could cover half of Chaotian. All of a sudden, she encountered another awareness 100,000 miles away. That awareness was very weak, but it seemed that she had seen it somewhere before. A thunderous boom rang out. A great deal of thick snow fell down from the peak, and the snowland quaked uneasily. It was a terrifying scene. The snowy waves dashed toward the south, representing her will and emotion. She was powerful and angry. How dare she threaten me? She was like an ant. Jingjiu's body trembled slightly, his face pale. If his feet weren't stuck in the cliff rocks, he would have fallen off the cliff again. In his current cultivation state, it was extremely dangerous to talk to a being of such a high state. His awareness could collapse at any moment. His Zhen Yuan was much more abundant and pure than the cultivation practitioners of the same state, but it had been used up in such a short time. His mind was exhausted to the extreme, much more than when he played the chess game with Tong Yen. The most troublesome part was that a shallow crack had appeared on the surface of his sword pill. However, he had received enough information and had also sent his own message. There were no words in the exchange, just the communication of awareness. The result of this negotiation was rather vague on the surface, but it was actually quite clear. If he did anything that would be regarded as a threat by the other party. Chapter 199. In a sense, that being was expressing her vigilance against Jingjiu. It meant that Jingjiu was a real threat in her eyes. There were very few people in this land who could pose a threat to her, or even none. Jingjiu wasn't proud of it, because he knew that it was because she had recognized him. The whole of Chaotian had witnessed the sword light that had shattered the heavenly thunder on the peak top of Aoyama back then. Moreover, the being was in a strange situation, so she had to be cautious. Jingjiu still wanted to give it a try. If he left or simply let the sword leave, would he be regarded as a threat by the being? It was because Bai Zhao was not in a good condition. The thoughtless sword shot up into the air, heading toward the south. All of a sudden, the willpower dropped down again. The wind and snow picked up abruptly, and a shapeless thunder exploded in the air. The thoughtless sword turned around and flew back to Jingjiu's hand with a faint blood-red glow. After making sure that the thoughtless sword was fine, Jingjiu looked at the deep end of the wind and snow with furrowed eyebrows. All he wanted to do was to leave. Why was the being so sensitive? Or was it the same for all lives at this moment? Why was it so unreasonable? Jingjiu returned to the cave and said to Bai Zhao, "We can't leave in a short time. Be prepared." Bai Zhao asked, "How long do we have to wait?" Jingjiu said, "When you form the golden pill again, you can use the 10,000-mile seal." Bai Zhao said softly, "That will take at least a few years, and it might even be impossible." Jingjiu said, "Let's wait until she gives birth to the child then. But I'm not sure how long it will take, because it's not recorded in the Taoist canon." Bai Zhao was taken aback a bit, asking, "Who are you talking about? Who is going to give birth?" Jingjiu said, "The Queen of the Snowy Kingdom." Bai Zhao was stunned, unable to speak for a while. She realized by now that all the peculiarities of this year's cultivation tournament were due to this. Why did the monster hiding deep under the snowland wake up in advance to prepare for the next monster invasion? Why did the world become so cold? So, it was because the Ice Queen was about to give birth. So she gathered all her people to lock down all possible paths to prevent the outside world from interfering. At the same time, she ensured her own safety. What is that strange cold mist? It should be her own blood energy. Bai Zhao hadn't completely recovered from the shock. He murmured, "As expected of the Ice Queen, giving birth to a child can cause such a huge change." She couldn't find any words to describe her current feelings. Listening to Bai Zhao's lament, Jingjiu felt a little strange. Back then, he had felt that something was about to happen. He thought that it was his arrival in this snowfield that had triggered a reaction from the heaven and earth. In truth, the reaction had nothing to do with him. It was only because the Ice Queen was about to give birth. His senior martial brother had predicted this, which was why he had arranged for him to come to the snowy plains to take a look. At that time, he thought that his deduction was based on self-confidence, but now it seemed that he was indeed a little too narcissistic. Bai Zhao asked, "I can understand why she doesn't want human cultivators to get close, but why doesn't she want us to leave?" Jingjiu said, "This might be her first time giving birth and she is really nervous. She is too sensitive and isn't willing to use logic to think about things. She only uses her instincts to judge things." The so-called instincts meant that when she saw that Jingjiu was dangerous, she would stare at him. Even if they were hundreds of thousands of miles away, she wouldn't allow him to do anything. At this moment, Jingjiu understood that all the actions that the Ice Queen saw as threats were actually all his actions. That was because the Ice Queen's wariness wasn't because of what those actions meant, but because of him. If the cultivator who was lost in this cold land wasn't him, then leaving would be much easier. He thought about all these things in silence. The cave was really silent. What does the Ice Queen look like? I heard that she is really ugly. Will her child be cuter when she gives birth? Baizeo asked curiously. Jingju didn't know how to reply to that question. Baizeo suddenly coughed. 2 unnatural patches of red appeared on his ashen white face. In such a cold environment, not to mention healing and forming a golden core, even surviving was a problem. That spiritual sense that came from the depths of the snow and wind was still looking at this place. Although it was just a bit, it was able to see everything in the cave. Jingju knew that he couldn't use his hands to break the stone and leave from the underground. How could the 2 of them make it through this extremely long period of cold? The pill-pearl ancient scripture might help your injuries. To cultivate this technique, you need to meditate for 3 years. Jingju didn't ask whether or not she was willing to learn and just started to chant. He only said the first 4 words of the scripture, "Thus I have heard," and then he stopped. That was because Baizeo said something. "So you really are the descendant of Guoqing Temple?" She looked into his eyes and asked softly, "Can the monks of Guoqing Temple return to normal life? Can they get married?" Before Jingju could answer, she remembered the legend of the broadsword saint, and a smile appeared on her face. After a moment of silence, Jingju reached out to touch the space between her eyebrows. His fingertip carried an extremely tranquil aura. Seeing the finger coming closer and closer, Baizeo was somewhat surprised. Only the Vedantas of Zen could perform a supreme technique like initiation. Even if you are the descendant of Guoqing Temple, how can you know it at such a young age? Without a sound, Jingju's fingertip touched the space between her eyebrows. Countless words and pictures slowly entered her sea of consciousness along with the sword awareness. Baizeo closed her eyes and meditated, silently comprehending and learning. After a long time, Jingju withdrew his finger. "If there is anything you don't understand, ask me quickly in the next few days." Baizeo opened her eyes and looked at him reluctantly. She knew that if she could master this part of the Dan Pearl Sutra, she would enter a long period of samadhi in a few days. She was very happy to be able to survive in such a cold environment and possibly form the golden elixir again. But thinking that it would be a long time before she could see Jingju, she couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Jingju didn't know what she was thinking. He sat down to regulate his breathing, and the iron sword in his bosom burned again, illuminating the cold and gloomy cave. Feeling the heat brought by the sword fire, Baizeo asked softly, "How long can you keep it up? If it doesn't get colder, I should be able to keep it up." Jingjiu was referring to the speed of Zhen Yuan's recovery. Baizeo asked in surprise, "Aren't you going to rest?" "I can use it for cultivation," said Jingjiu. Returning to Aoyama to resume cultivation, Jingjiu didn't encounter any problems. All he needed to do was to wait for the crucial time to come. Since he couldn't leave in a short time, he might as well continue cultivation without any disturbance. Baizeo said worriedly, "That would be too hard." Jingjiu said, "The disciples of Aoyama are used to cultivation diligently." Zhao Leo had sat on the sword peak for 3 years, fighting against the sword wills day and night. It was very hard to endure. In comparison, this place is only a bit colder, but it's not a big deal. Thinking of Jingjiu's appearance at the plum meeting, Baizeo thought that his perception of Zhao Leu might be wrong. "Is her talent in cultivation very good?" he asked. Jingjiu said, "Not bad." This wasn't a very high evaluation. Baizeo asked curiously, "In your opinion, how is her cultivation state compared to mine?" Jingjiu said, "Her cultivation state is not high enough because she is still young. If nothing unexpected happens, she will surpass Lo Huainan in 10 years. Jingju didn't answer Bai Zhao's question directly, but Bai Zhao understood what Jingju meant. Lo Huainan was the strongest swordsman of the young generation. Zhuoruzhui stayed behind closed doors on the top of Tianguang Peak, and no one in the world could be a match for him. If Lo Huainan's talent wasn't as good as Zhao Lei's, Jingju couldn't either. In Jingju's eyes, such a talent was only not bad. Yet, Bai Zhao didn't believe what Jingju said. After so many things had happened, her opinion of Lo Huainan was extremely bad, but she still thought that Lo Huainan's talent in cultivation was unparalleled. Even though Zhao Lei had natural Dao quality, she couldn't surpass Jingju in 10 years. Speaking of Lo Huainan, Bai Zhao felt sad. Then she remembered what Jingju said that day. The goal of cultivation is longevity. Life and death are the only things that need to be respected. It is disrespectful to use it as a test. Now she understood what Jingju meant. Lo Huainan didn't pass the test, but she paid a heavy price. She didn't want to think about these things anymore. She asked, Zhao Lei sees Lo Huainan as her goal. Is that why she cultivates so hard? Jingju shook his head and didn't say anything. He thought that the goal of her cultivation was himself. Just now outside the cave, did you want the thoughtless sword to fly out of the snowland to ask for help? No. Those who can save us, as long as they come in, they will arouse the vigilance and anger of that person, and then they will be killed. Those who can't save us will die if they come in. Then what are you going to do? I want to send a message to Zhao Lei. Send a message? What's the content? If I haven't come out after 10 years, I will kill Lo Huainan. Why don't you want to expose the true face of Lo Huainan in the sword letter? Because unless we live to tell the story, no one will believe it. Then why don't you leave with the seal of 10,000 miles? That person shouldn't be able to stop you. No one will believe me if I tell the story alone. But at least you can live. I won't die anyway. But you don't have to suffer in such a cold place. If I leave, I won't come back. It will be too troublesome. You will die. You are worried about me, so you stay here to accompany me? If you don't concentrate on your cultivation and healing, you will die soon. Then I can leave. In the middle of summer, there were still many clouds in the town, even more than in previous years. The clouds flowing out from the mountains gathered in the sky above the town and refused to disperse. When the sunlight was at its strongest, a sword boat could be vaguely seen in the clouds, casting a shadow on the ground. The residents of the town, the tourists, and the believers knelt in the shadow, kowtowing to the sword boat in the sky, hoping to receive the blessing bestowed by the immortal masters. The sword boat didn't return to Aoyama, at the request of Zhao Lei. Because of her injury, the sword boat didn't dare fly fast. It took some time to travel from Zhaoga City to here. She felt a bit better, but her face was still a bit pale. The sword boat stopped a few days after the cultivation tournament began, and it was also the time when Jingju didn't feel well. She didn't feel well either. Then, more news came from the snowland. Jingju made a move. Jingju won the first place in the cultivation tournament. Jingju demanded that the cultivation tournament be stopped immediately, and all the disciples of Aoyama who participated in the tournament were forcibly taken away. This event caused a lot of discussion in both Zhaoga City and Aoyama. The 9 disciples of Aoyama were sent to White Town unscathed. But Jingju was nowhere to be found. Standing at the bow of the sword boat, Zhao Lei looked at the clouds in the distance, saying, "Let's go to White Town." Chapter 200. The disciples of Shiriyue Peak, who were driving the boat, eyed each other speechlessly, not knowing what to do. Their task was to go to Zhaoga City to bring back the injured Zhao Lei. Now that Aoyama was right in front of them, it was already against the order of their masters to stay on the sword boat for a few more days, let alone going to the distant north. Gu Qing said to those disciples seriously, "Go get ready. You all know that my master and senior master don't have good tempers." Along with the slight quiver, the clouds around the sword boat were disturbed, turning into wisps and falling behind. Gu Qing walked back to the bow of the boat. His line of sight returned from the broken clouds to the back of Zhao Lei, his eyes full of worry. The sword boat didn't travel very fast, and Zhao Lei didn't urge it. It took them a few days to arrive in White Town. White Town, which used to be quiet in the past, was now much livelier, but it also felt colder. The twilight was thick, devoid of any warmth. It was the middle of summer, but it felt like the middle of winter. As the sword boat of Aoyama landed, the magic boats of many sects could be vaguely seen in the distance. Many courtyards were scattered on the snow-covered fields, which were obviously newly built in the last few days. They still don't forget to live comfortably at such a critical moment. They are truly the immortals. Gu Qing's expression was very calm when he said this, and no one could sense the sarcasm in his words. It seemed that Zhao Lei didn't hear what he said, as her line of sight was fixed on the surrounding twilight. Though her cultivation state was still low, her acquired sword body had a very sensitive perception, so she could sense a few powerful energies above the clouds. They must be the super swordsmen of various sects, gazing at the distant north. Would they just stand there and watch? The wooden sword boat landed outside a courtyard. Nan Wang stood outside the courtyard. A few days ago, she, Duke of He, and the others left Zhaoga City and came here. She wouldn't have come out to greet Zhao Lei in person if it were any other time. The two of them were of the same generation and status, but their experience and cultivation states were far different. The situation was different today. Jingjiu had contributed greatly to the Aoyama sect and even the entire cultivation world. However, he was trapped in the snowfield, his fate unknown. It was natural for Shinhua Peak to be concerned about this matter, and it was something that needed to be treated seriously. When Zhao Lei walked into the courtyard, the Aoyama disciples greeted her. Gu Qing followed behind her. He glanced around and found that there were exactly 9 of them. Nan Wang didn't follow them in because he wanted to make it easier for Shinhua Peak to ask questions or throw a tantrum. What happened? Zhao Lei asked expressionlessly. Yao Songshan stepped forward and recounted everything that had happened in the law battles in detail. Zhao Lei remained silent for a while, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the Aoyama disciples. The Aoyama disciples lowered their heads. The Liangwang Peak disciple named Lei Ilkyung blushed with shame. When Jingjiu asked them to leave, they were so indignant that they even thought of disobeying the order, regardless of their seniority. However, what happened in the law battles proved Jingjiu's prediction. If it weren't for Jingjiu, they would have died in that weird cold fog like the 2 Western Sea Sword School disciples. Zhao Lei didn't ask them about what had happened, as Nan Wang had expected. She didn't say anything after asking them about what had happened. Instead, she asked them to leave. Later, the Grand Supreme Elder of the Ozawa sect and the Platonist sect came to express their gratitude and offer their condolences to Zhao Lei. Then, Duke of He, Monk Duhai, and the others came to visit. Finally, no one came and the courtyard was quiet again. What do you mean by condolences? This is too much. Young Yuan said with red eyes. Gu Qing was still calm, saying, "What should we do next? Wait here?" No one knows what happened in the snowland. The sect master's decree clearly states that the Aoyama disciples are forbidden to step into the snowland, especially me. Zhao Lei said indifferently. Gu Qing thought for a while and said, "I'll go there and ask around." No matter how badly Lo Huainan was injured, she couldn't have been in a coma for too long in the Cloud Dream Mountain. Zhao Lei looked at the rain clouds in the south and said, "I'll go to see the sword justice." Young Yuan wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Gu Qing went to the Zhongzhou school. As the leaders of the Orthodox cultivation circle, the Zhongzhou school and the Aoyama sect had always disliked each other. If it were in the past, he would never receive any kind glances, only vigilant and hostile ones. But today, he received a cup of hot tea. After knowing that he was the disciple of Jingjiu, There was even a fruit plate on the table in front of him. The person who received him changed from an ordinary disciple to an elder in Yuanying realm. The atmosphere in the courtyard of the Zhongzhou school was a bit tense. Bai Zhao was the only daughter of the sect master, and her position in the Aoyama sect was much more important than that of Jingjiu. Gu Qing asked, "Senior, is Immortal Master Luo awake?" The elder said, "Not yet. Bai Zhenren is treating him." The cultivation circle knew that Bai Zhao followed his mother's surname, so Bai Zhenren was the wife of the sect master of the Zhongzhou school. In the Mingcue Valley outside Zhaoga City, Zhao Lei was assassinated by Wei Chenzi, an elder in the Yuanying realm of Zhongzhou school. Bai Zhenren went to Aoyama sect to see the sect master of Aoyama and Yuan Qijing to explain the matter. Considering Gu Qing's status, he had no chance to see her. The couple of the sect master of the Zhongzhou school were both highly achieved swordsmen in the Desheng state, equivalent to the sect master of Aoyama and Yuan Qijing in the heavenly arrival state. They were as powerful as the immortals in the legend. With the help of such figures, Lo Huainan would wake up soon as long as she was still breathing. "Is it inconvenient for us to wait here?" asked Gu Qing. The elder of the Zhongzhou school glanced at him, thinking that it was inconvenient for a disciple of Aoyama to stay in their sect since it was getting dark. But he understood why Jingjiu was in a hurry, so he didn't ask him to leave. "You wait here then," he said. What he meant was that Jingjiu shouldn't walk around, as it would cause some misunderstanding. Gu Qing thanked him profusely. The elder of the Zhongzhou school wouldn't stay with him all the time, so he left first. Looking at the new hot tea and fruit plate, Gu Qing had a more and more vivid feeling. The relationship between the Aoyama sect and the Zhongzhou school was about to improve. It turned out that the disappearance of his master and Bai Zhao would unite the orthodox cultivation circle. Thinking of all this, Gu Qing waited in silence. As the night grew darker, he heard footsteps. Jingjiu raised his head. The elder of the Zhongzhou school walked in and said, "Huainan has woken up." Gu Qing's expression turned solemn. He adjusted his sitting posture and put on a posture of listening attentively. The elder of the Zhongzhou school began to narrate the story told by Lo Huainan. Gu Qing listened very seriously, his expression focused. He would hum from time to time and let out a soft gasp. His face was full of worry, moved, and finally melancholy. In the story, Jingjiu and Bai Zhao were good people, and so was Lo Huainan. But before that, in order to save Tong Lu, he fought with the snow worm and was swallowed by the worm. He was badly injured and his consciousness was a bit hazy. He could remember a bloody sword piercing through the skin of the snow worm. Junior sister Bai Zhao poured Jin Yuan into his body. Jingjiu stood in the wind and snow, fighting with the snow worm with an indifferent expression. The cold fog didn't seem to harm him. The wind and snow grew stronger, and the fog grew colder. The situation became more dangerous. Jingjiu was covered in blood, but he was still fearless. Seeing that Jingjiu couldn't hold on any longer, junior sister Bai Zhao activated the 10,000-mile seal and brought him back to the Cloud Dream Mountain. The last scene he saw was junior sister Bai Zhao rushing toward Jingjiu, and then the sky and earth turned white. It was an avalanche. It wasn't the real snow falling down from the cliff, but countless snow worms. After telling the story, Lo Huainan fell unconscious again. Having heard the story, Gu Qing took his leave. After telling the story, the elder of the Zhongzhou school looked at him with a gentler expression. He said his condolences, and asked Xiang Wanshu to see him off. Xiang Wanshu was very sad and said something to him. Gu Qing didn't remember the specific content of those words, but they were mostly about thanking him, saying that he would like to visit Jingjiu if he didn't have Jingjiu, etc. The reason he couldn't remember these words was that he felt a bit cold at the moment. The field of White Town at night was even colder than it was during the day. Looking at the faintly visible grayish-white under the night sky in the north, Jingjiu wondered if that was the rumored cold fog that would kill anyone who entered it. Would his master still be alive? Jingjiu tightened his collar reflexively. He had learned the six-dragon sword style of Shiyue Peak when he was on Liangwang Peak. His sword energy was like a fiery dragon, and so was his will of sword, which was least afraid of the cold. Yet, he felt a bone-piercing coldness at the moment. The long night was coming to an end. The morning sun was about to rise. As Gu Qing returned to the courtyard of the Aoyama sect, Zhao Lei had just returned as well. It was unclear how long she had stayed under the dark rain cloud, but she still couldn't change the attitude of the important figures of the Aoyama sect. Yuan Qijing didn't allow her to enter the snowland. Young Yuan showed a hesitant expression, saying, "What if I—" "No need," said Gu Qing while patting his shoulder. Then, Jingjiu told him the story of Lo Huainan. It was a simple story. It was because Lo Huainan was severely wounded, and her spiritual awareness was not clear, so many details were missing. Young Yuan listened to Jingjiu carefully, and filled in the scenes in his mind. He felt that his senior master was very outstanding, and his blood was boiling. He wished he could rush into the snowland and fight those monsters. Zhao Lei suddenly looked at Gu Qing and asked, "What do you think?" Gu Qing fell silent for a while and said, "This is a good story. There are no loopholes if there are no details, but I still don't believe it." It was because he didn't believe it that he felt the cold night wind when he left the Zhongzhou school. Zhao Lei said expressionlessly, "I don't believe it either." Young Yuan was a bit surprised, asking, "I don't think there is anything wrong with it." Gu Qing said, "That's because you have had too little contact with my master." Young Yuan asked confusedly, "What's wrong with senior master?" Gu Qing said bitterly, "It's because he can't be the brave and fearless person described by Lo Huainan, who fought bloody battles and refused to leave until the end." Young Yuan didn't understand, wondering why Lo Huainan said so many good things about senior master Jingjiu and described him as so outstanding. Gu Qing said, "I can't explain it clearly. Anyway, the temperament of the person she described doesn't match the master's." Chapter 201. The morning sun peeked out for a while, but it was soon swallowed by the clouds. It was unclear if it was because it was too cold, but the color of the morning sun was a bit pale, looking rather lethargic. Zhao Lei walked to the front of White Town and turned her head to look at the north. The snowland was right in front of her, and Jingjiu was inside, but she couldn't get in. In her current cultivation state, it would be useless even if she went there. She would die before she could pass through the patch of cold fog. She needed help at the moment, but the Aoyama sect wouldn't allow her to get in, so they wouldn't help her. As such, she had no choice but to find that person. Yuan Qijing didn't want to talk to her last night, but she pointed out the matter. As a result, Yuan Qijing pointed out a path for her. That path led to a temple. There was only one temple in White Town, and it was easy to find. She walked to the front of the temple, thinking that she would see that person, but she saw Guodong first, feeling surprised. Sitting on the doorsill, Guodong was lost in thought. A pair of couplets were hung on both sides of the temple gate. "Save the suffering, save the mortals, and pray to the Buddha and the Taoists." This pair of couplets might have a profound meaning, but Zhao Lei didn't think about it. She walked toward the inside of the temple. As she passed by Guodong, she asked, "Have you recovered from your wound?" Zhao Lei uttered, and walked to the front of the golden Buddha statue, narrowing her eyes. Though the sunlight was dim, it was still a bit dazzling after being reflected by the golden paint. The golden Buddha statue looked stout, his belly exposed, his smiling face squinting slightly. Her gaze fell on the broadsword in front of the Buddha statue. The iron broadsword was as long as the beam of a room, and it was indescribably heavy. Thinking of the rumors about this broadsword, Zhao Lei's eyes grew brighter, giving birth to a glimmer of hope. Yet, where was the owner of this broadsword? She turned around and walked to the front of the temple gate, asking, "What is going on?" "She is giving birth," said Guodong. Zhao Lei was taken aback, asking, "Who?" "The Queen of the Snowy Kingdom," replied Guodong. Zhao Lei asked after a moment of silence, "What is the fog?" "That mist is her blood qi." Looking at the fog in the north, Guodong said, "This is the most important moment in her life." As such, she summoned all of her tribesmen back at the expense of her blood and energy. It's because she doesn't want to be disturbed. Of course, she won't initiate the provocation. Zhao Lei said, "I've read in a book that it's very painful for a woman to give birth. She will become very weak." Guodong said, "I've read about it in a book. I went to see it once out of curiosity. It's indeed very painful, and the pregnant woman will become weaker. I'm wondering if this is the weakest moment in her long life." Zhao Lei said, "In that case, why don't you summon all the cultivators in the cultivation world to enter the snowland and kill her? First of all, she hasn't given birth yet. She hasn't reached her weakest state yet. No one knows how many years we have to wait." Guodong said, "Even if she had given birth, how many guys do you think would dare to go inside and kill her?" Zhao Lei didn't understand. Wasn't this the best opportunity for the human race? If we summon all the swordsmen of the human race, we can kill her even without those old guys of the deviant sex, even if she hasn't given birth yet. Guodong lifted her head and said calmly, "The problem is that 90% of the participants will die. Who would be willing to give up the path to longevity to risk their lives?" "But someone has to do it," said Zhao Lei. Hearing this, Guodong let out a faint smile, feeling gratified. Many years ago, she acted like what Zhao Lei was doing now. She contacted the strongest swordsmen of various sects and told them her plan. She even went to the back of the Cloud Dream Mountain and the Hermit Peaks of Oyama. However, nobody responded to her except that idiot. Jingyang's answer was the best. It was so good that she hadn't seen him since that day. Over the years, only that idiot has been risking his life here. Have you ever seen them come here? Sitting on the doorsill, Guodong said this with a disdainful expression while pointing to those important figures of the cultivation world behind the clouds. "Who are you?" Zhao Lei asked while looking at her. She had such an attitude toward the important figures like the sect master of Zhongzhou School, the godly swordsman of West Ocean, and Yuan Qijing, and described the Broadsword King as an idiot. It was impossible for her to be a young disciple of Shui Yu nunnery. Guodong didn't answer. A sigh broke out in the temple. Guodong didn't heed it. Zhao Lei turned around, but she still didn't see anybody, and she couldn't tell where the voice came from. "I understand why you are here, but I can't help you." The voice was deep and bright, echoing in the temple. It seemed to come from everywhere, but it also seemed that something was missing, making those who heard it feel frustrated. Though she didn't see anybody, Zhao Lei knew who he was. She bowed to the person in the temple earnestly, saying, "Zhao Lei of Oyama greets the Master Broadsword King." The owner of the voice in the temple was the Broadsword King. He was the successor of experiencing the mortal world 3 generations ago at the Guoqing Temple. He came to the north under the order to join the Windy Broadsword Church. He won first place in the cultivation tournament of the Plum Meeting as a regular disciple of the Windy Broadsword Church, but he didn't want to return to the Guoqing Temple to inherit the legacy of the chief monk. In the following years, the weak Windy Broadsword Church suppressed the Kunlun sect and became the most powerful cultivation sect in the north of Chaotian. He himself became one of the most powerful swordsmen in the cultivation world. What was more impressive was that he had never left White Town since he came to it. Over the years, he led the followers and cooperated with the Northern Magic Army to resist the invasion of the monsters of the Snowy Kingdom. He was the only person in the world who dared fight against the Queen of the Snowy Kingdom, and he never stopped fighting. Over the years, he had fought with that being many times, and he had been severely wounded and nearly killed many times, but he had never given up. He guarded the wind and snow alone. He became a saint. The godly swordsman of West Ocean had a very high cultivation state, comparable to that of a god, which was why he was called the godly swordsman. The sword sects like the Aoyama sect and the No Mercy sect had never been convinced by his title. Yet, nobody in Chaotian dared be convinced by the title of the Broadsword King. Otherwise, it would be you. Besides the immortal Jingyang, few people could win the respect of Zhao Lei. To be frank, she didn't even think highly of the likes of the sect master of Aoyama and the godly swordsman of West Ocean. She had merely lived a few more years. If she could live a few more years, it was hard to say who would be more powerful. She was convinced by the Broadsword King. It was because she couldn't do such a thing. As such, she bowed to him earnestly and humbly. The Broadsword King said, "Since the Peak Master is the personal disciple of the immortal Jingyang, you can meet me as an equal." Zhao Lei straightened her body and asked, "Forgive me for asking directly, but why can't you help me? If someone dared enter the Snowland and bring Jingzhou out, it would be the Broadsword King. He had both the courage and the ability to do so. I've known her for so many years, but I've never seen her in such a state of mind. She's extremely sensitive, easily angered, and irascible. I have a feeling that even the slightest movement that causes her to misunderstand, let alone probing or provoking her, she will launch the most violent counterattack. To be precise, she may go crazy. In that case, even if those beings in the sky are willing to help us, if we really kill her, at least half of the entire human world will die with her. If we don't do anything now, the northern land will have a period of peace. She will have to raise a child, so she will be busy. As such, the period of peace will be longer." Having heard this, Zhao Lei fell silent for a long time. In comparison to the peace that would last for a few decades or even longer in the Northland, the important figures, let alone Jing Jiu and Bai Zhao, were not worth mentioning. Should we just wait like this? What if she gives birth to the child? At that time, the human race may have to face two queens. The world of the Snowy Kingdom is simpler than ours. There can only be one queen. After she raises the child, I believe they will fight among themselves to determine the winner. If the winner still wants to go south, I will fight with her. If you don't dare to go in now, can you defeat her in the future? Everything was reasonable, but she still felt uncomfortable. Even if it was the Broadsword King, she still wanted to mock him. The Broadsword King's voice was very calm, even a little stupid. "I can't defeat her, not in this life, but I still have to fight." Zhao Lei had nothing to say. The Broadsword King's voice did not ring out again. She walked back to the door of the temple and sat on the threshold. Looking at the snowland in the north, she said softly, "Are we just going to wait like this?" She had asked the same question before. That time, she was talking about the Queen of the Snowy Kingdom. This time, she was talking about Jingzhou. That patch of fog is too cold. Nobody can survive in it. So we don't have to wait. But we have to pretend that we are worried and want to do something. Guodong said, "Just wait and see. All of them will leave in a few days, and the excitement in White Town will die down." Zhao Lei said, "But Jingzhou is not dead yet." Guodong said, "He is either dead or dying. Either way, he is dead." Zhao Lei said, "No, he won't die even if you all die." Having said that, it became quiet in the temple. Two young girls sat on the threshold. The Golden Buddha looked at them. The cold fog covered the snowland. The spiritual boats of various sects had left one after another. Zhao Lei asked Gu Qing and Young Yuan to leave on the Aoyama sword boat, but she stayed behind. White Town grew colder and colder. Autumn had just arrived, but it had snowed a few times. The wells in the town were all frozen, and it was hard for the fire beds to keep warm. Even the most devout believers were forced to leave. Guodong had left as well. Zhao Lei was still sitting on the threshold. It was still cold in the spring after the winter. The fog on the snowland didn't lessen until the midsummer arrived. Finally, White Town felt a bit warmer. The well water melted, and the pear flowers bloomed all over the town. Jingjiu hadn't come back yet. Zhao Lei stood up, her black braid hanging down, much longer than last year. She pulled up her braid and cut it off slightly, throwing it on the ground, and then left. Her short hair was messy as the wind rose. Chapter 202. Prime Minister Yi Qingyu, watching the tide song Xin Qiji looking at the gulls and herons flying in the sky, the earth drum moved. The Zhejiang group drove the mountain. The fierce battle did not subdue the Pai tiger. Day and night. Used to it, Wu was not afraid of the flood dragon's anger. Wind ripple step. Looking at the red mantis flying, the fish jumping straight up, dancing on the waves. Who asked, the whale swallowed 10,000 miles, the human world played 1,000 crossbows. What was the matter? The white horse and the plain carriage went east. Hateful, the people were right, the resentment and anger would last for eternity. Fame would be wasted. Cursing the sect for Tao Zhu, the west lake of the 5 lakes, a boat in the misty rain. The mist gradually dispersed. The setting sun illuminated the mountains. The sword-washing stream flowed slowly, turning into a golden whip, just like it had for countless years. This year was the minor new year in Aoyama. The disciples who had been cultivating by the stream for a long time and were ready to inherit the sword did not have outstanding talents. In contrast, the guests from various sects were more eye-catching. As usual, the Guoqing Temple, the Platonist sect, and Ozawa all sent representatives. The Windblade sect also sent an envoy for the 3rd time in a row. Surprisingly, someone from the Center sect had come as well. This was the first time in hundreds of years that this had happened. It was well known that the Cloud Dream Mountain had kept silent even when the immortal Jing Yang ascended. The guest from the Zhongzhou school was a 2nd-generation disciple. The disciples of Aoyama did not think it was disrespectful because the person was very famous in the cultivation world. The young disciples stood by the stream and looked nervously at the cliffs. They did not know if they could pass the test and be chosen by the masters of the peaks. On the mountain path between the cliffs and the high platform in the sunset, the guests and the masters and disciples of the peaks of Aoyama were scattered. Many eyes fell on the disciple from the Zhongzhou school. Some of them were hostile, but most of them were curious. I remember he participated in the cultivation tournament 10 years ago, so he should not be young. Why does he still look so young and childish? Is this what they mean by, a person is like his name? It's said that he entered the Tao through chess, that he has extraordinary talent, and that his chess skills are the best in history. I wonder if it's true. Zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting are all minor Taos. There's no need to care about them. Besides, he lost to youngest uncle. How can he say that he's the best? The cliff became quiet. Someone let out a sigh. A feeling of sadness and regret enveloped the crowd. The little martial uncle that the Aoyama disciples mentioned was Jingjiu. Many years ago, the young master who came from a small village became a celebrity among the 9 peaks of Aoyama after he entered the sword-washing pavilion from the South Pine Pavilion. Because of the stories between him and Liangwang Peak, because of the relationship between him and the 2 cultivators with natural Tao quality, because of his laziness and most of all because of his face. At the inherited sword competition one year, Jingjiu finally demonstrated his rare talent in sword work by this stream. Then, at the sword trial of Aoyama one year, he stood out for some reason and defeated a few disciples of Liangwang Peak, and in the end, he even broke the sword of Guananshan, the principal disciple of Aoyama. The masters of the 9 peaks thought he was an unparalleled genius in sword work, hoping that he could surprise the cultivation world on behalf of Aoyama. He didn't let them down. At the last plum meeting, he defeated Tong Yen and won first place in the chess tournament, and then he defeated the powerful Lo Huainan and Tong Lu to win first place in the cultivation tournament. He showed off his talent and showed his brilliance. The last part was a story that was known by all of Chaotian. On the eve of the upheaval of the Snowy Kingdom, he stood out and saved the lives of many cultivation colleagues, including Lo Huainan, but he himself disappeared in the patch of cold fog. The cultivation practitioners of Chaotian felt regretful whenever they thought of this event. In addition to talent and diligence, the most important factor on the long path of cultivation was fate. The disciples of Aoyama felt even sadder when they thought of this event, and they missed their youngest senior master very much. Jingju didn't get along well with his colleagues, and he didn't have a good relationship with the disciples of Aoyama because of what had happened between him and Liangwang Peak. But things had changed a long time ago. First of all, his outstanding performance at the Plum meeting had won a great honor for Aoyama, and secondly, what had happened in the cultivation tournament. Thinking back on it, the disciples of Aoyama knew how much effort Jingjiu had put in for this event. The 9 disciples rescued by him had become the most loyal protectors of Jingjiu's reputation. One time, 4 disciples of Liangwang Peak, including Yao Songshan and Lei Ilkyung, heard Jian Russian mocking Jingjiu in private for overestimating his own strength. They were so furious that they lost control of themselves. 4 flashes of sword light struck down at him, making him bleed all over. Even the 4th big brother Jian Ryun couldn't save him. If Guo Nanshan and Gu Han hadn't persuaded Jian Russian to kowtow in front of the Shinma Peak to apologize, they might have caused a bloody fight to the death. The Zhongzhou school and the Aoyama sect had a good relationship and sent someone to observe the inherited sword competition because of Jingjiu. In that story, the reason he and Bai Zhao disappeared was to save Lo Huainan. More importantly, he was no longer here, so everything related to him was naturally good. A Sai came from the cliff where the disciples of Liangwang Peak were. Everything is fate. Some people have better lives. Guananshan frowned slightly. He knew that the speaker was Lei Ilkyung, and he was talking about Lo Huainan. This young brother, who had admired him the most, had now become the most fanatical believer of Jingjiu. Every time he mentioned this matter, he sounded very unhappy. Lo Huainan was indeed very lucky. Though she was seriously injured, her foundation of cultivation was not hurt. It was said that she had a special encounter in the Snowland, and her golden elixir was not destroyed. Her state improved rapidly, and her strength became more powerful. In the past, when Guananshan entered the state of free travel, he might be able to compete with him for a while. But now there was an obvious gap between them. Guananshan frowned not because of jealousy or dissatisfaction, but because he didn't like what Lei Ilkyung had said. In his opinion, if this was fate, it meant that Lo Huainan was born to do great things, and she should shoulder the responsibility of the righteous path. Seeing his expression, Gu Han said to the young brothers, "Cultivationist Luo has been killing demons and devils everywhere these years, regardless of the influence of her cultivation, and even life and death. Such determination is really admirable, and we should learn from her. Don't talk about her casually." The disciples of Liangwang Peak responded in unison. Gu Han looked at a stone platform on the cliff, feeling a little regretful. Shinma Peak still hadn't appeared. Those young disciples by the stream were also regretful. They all wanted to be a disciple of Shinma Peak. She has never been to Shinma Peak. Our senior master aunt is so similar to our senior granduncle. It is said that her Taoist heart has died, so she has been focusing on cultivation in the peak. Of course, she won't take any more disciples. Why? Is it because she is too sad about the death of senior Uncle Jingjiu? What nonsense is that? She stayed on the Sword Peak for a few years. Is it because she was hurt in love? Even if you like Senior Master Jing, don't try to deny it. Many people saw the scene of Senior Master Jing arranging flowers for Senior Master Ant at the Plum meeting. They never admitted that they were cultivation partners. Besides, Senior Master Jing and the fairy Bai Zhao had a good relationship. If nothing had happened to them, who knows what would happen to them now? Senior Master Jing met cultivationist Bai Zhao for the first time at the plum meeting. It's impossible. The youngest brother of Liang Wang Peak said that she and Senior Master Jing fought together in the cultivation tournament. Do you know how much pressure Senior Master Jing was under? Why did she support him so much? That's right. The most obvious evidence is that there are 2 seals of 10,000 miles in Zhongzhou School. Lo Huainan used one, and Bai Zhao still has one. But why didn't she come out? This is what it means to live and die together. If their love wasn't stronger than gold, it wouldn't be like this. The young girls of Qingrong Peak were gossiping, but they didn't know that the disciple of Zhongzhou School had heard them. The twilight shone on the young face, which didn't show any emotion, except that he was a bit thinner than he was at the plum meeting. Tong Yen looked at the empty stone platform. He stayed behind closed doors after the chess tournament of the plum meeting. Even though he knew about the cultivation tournament, he didn't leave the Cloud Dream Mountain. He came out from behind closed doors not long ago and learned that Zhongzhou School would send someone to observe the inherited sword competition of Aoyama, so he requested to go. Among the 9 peaks of Aoyama, Shunma Peak was the loneliest. A figure by the cliff's edge was also very lonely. Even the wind was blowing gently at her short hair, making it even messier. It had been 3 years. She hadn't combed her hair. It was because she didn't know where Jingjiu had put the good wooden comb. She didn't wear pigtails anymore. It was because she wouldn't. Whether in White Town or on the top of Shinma Peak, she had only done one thing in the last 3 years, which was cultivation. It was just like what she had done on the Sword Peak. Nobody knew how hard she had cultivated and how fast she had improved her cultivation state. She had already seen the hope of entering the state of free travel after cultivating for just over 10 years. If this news were to spread out, the whole cultivation circle would be shocked. The latest news. Gu Qing's voice rang out behind her. Zhao Lei said nonchalantly, "Tell me." Similar to the previous times, he killed a ferocious demon in Yuzhou and was wounded. He stopped the crowd from praising him, saying that if Jingjiu were still here, Gu Qing said, then he didn't say anything more. He left with a sigh. His emotions? Asked Zhao Lei. Gu Qing said, I didn't ask him directly. Judging from his description, he was mostly sentimental and frustrated, but he didn't feel sad anymore. What do you think of it? Asked Zhao Lei. Gu Qing said, this is the 7th emotion he has shown. It's getting weaker and weaker each time. But it's normal because time always dilutes everything. But, pressed Zhao Lei, Lo Huainan was the strongest swordsman of the young generation. His reputation was even higher now, and no one could match him. Many people didn't understand why he didn't seize the time to cultivate, but traveled the world every once in a while to kill demons. His answer was that his life was given to him by Jingjiu and his young sister, so he shouldn't use it all on himself. He should return it to heaven and earth. Gu Qing said, but I think it's normal, so normal that it feels deliberate. It seems that he wants people to remember it on purpose. Maybe he feels guilty, Zhao Lei said. Gu Qing said after a moment of silence, maybe. What do you think of the story from 3 years ago? Asked Zhao Lei. I still don't believe it, said Gu Qing. The Jingjiu in that story was too perfect, like a great hero that only existed in stories. I don't believe it either, said Zhao Lei, because that's not Jingjiu, but the person Lo Huainan wants to be. If the Jingjiu in the story was a person imagined by Lo Huainan, then the story was naturally made up. Why did Lo Huainan make up this story? This was the root of all the problems. Zhao Lei looked to the far north and said, It's been 3 years. Yes, said Gu Qing. Chapter 203. The wind on the peak top was a bit chilly, but there was no whistling sound. The monkeys in the forest at the foot of the cliff were also silent. Not a sound. Gu Qing said after a long silence, It's not easy to kill him. Maybe we should wait a few more years. Zhao Lei said, we are improving and he is also improving. If we wait until we can kill him, how many years will it take? Gu Qing said, I've calculated. I don't have any hope in the first 100 years, but if I can enter the broken sea state, I might have a chance in 100 years. His tone was very calm, but it was filled with a touching firmness. Even for the cultivation practitioners with a lifespan far longer than mortals, who would calculate and prepare for something in 100 years. Zhao Lei said, I've also calculated that I can surpass him in at least 5 years. 3 years plus 5 years would be 8 years. She didn't know Jingzhou's evaluation of her in the cold cave 3 years ago, otherwise she would have been proud. At that time, Jingzhou told Bai Zhao that Zhao Lei could surpass Lo Huainan in 10 years. So he was going to use the thoughtless sword to send her a message, asking her to kill Lo Huainan in 10 years. Gu Qing said, It's never too late for the immortals to take revenge. Zhao Lei said, I'm a woman. Gu Qing smiled bitterly, but didn't say anything. And if he doesn't die, the world in my eyes won't be clean, and my Taoist heart will be tainted. I won't be able to enter the free travel state, and I won't be able to kill him. I understand. Zhao Lei said after a moment of silence, what I don't understand is that Zhongzhou school cultivates the orthodox magic skills. If he really did it, how could he maintain his Taoist heart when he was cultivating the magic skills? Instead of being possessed by the devil, he advanced very fast. Gu Qing said, I don't understand either. Zhao Lei asked, Is your family suspicious? For the past 3 years, she and Gu Qing had been cultivating in Shenma Peak and had never left. It was not easy for them to learn about the news in the world, let alone about Lo Huainan. All these things were inquired about by Gu Qing's clan. Now Gu Qing's position in the family was getting more and more stable, and he was about to catch up with Gu Han. Even though Gu Han was stimulated by his defeat at the hands of Jingzhou, he had already reached the upper state of the undefeated last year. Since Jingzhou was dead and Zhao Lei was still alive, coupled with his reputation, the future of Shenma Peak was very promising. Gu Qing was now in charge of all matters in Shenma Peak, including those monkeys. Of course, the family would support him fully. Gu Qing said calmly, I've inquired about many things. The clan shouldn't be able to guess that the one we're really concerned about is Lo Huainan. The monkeys in the forest suddenly screamed. Gu Qing said, Little Yuan is here. Zhao Lei stopped talking about this matter. Since that night 3 years ago, she and Gu Qing never talked about Lo Huainan in front of young Yuan again. They didn't doubt him, but they had already guessed his background and didn't want to get him involved. At the same time, they wanted to keep it a secret. After all, what they wanted to do was too shocking. On that night 3 years ago, Zhao Lei and Gu Qing had said that they didn't believe in the story told by Lo Huainan. Shanghai Peak should have learned the news soon, but they didn't do anything about it. This meant that Shanghai Peak didn't believe in their judgment. The worst possibility was that Shanghai Peak believed in their judgment but didn't want to do anything. Footsteps sounded. Young Yuan came to the cliff's edge with a surprised expression on his face. Master, Tong Yen wants to see you. Do you want to see her? Guests from other sects seldom came to Liangwang Peak. A guest came to Liangwang Peak that day, and the sword lights on the cliff platform had disappeared. Even if he was a guest, it was inappropriate for him to see the secret sword of the 9 peaks of Aoyama. Moreover, the guest was from Zhongzhou school. This was the evidence that the relationship between Aoyama sect and Zhongzhou school had improved, but the disciples of Liangwang Peak were still cautious. The atmosphere in the cliff cave was not as tense as the disciples of Liangwang Peak had imagined. Tong Yen sat down after greeting Guananshan, Gu Han, Jian Ryun and Ma Hua. Both of them looked calm, but it was not the kind of calmness of strangers, but the calmness of trust. We had talked about it during the plum meeting that it would be more interesting when you came to visit Aoyama. Guananshan said with a smile, though you are the only one here today, it's a good start. It's a pity that young brother Yu and Rujui are still behind closed doors. Otherwise, all of us would be here. Tong Yen shot a glance at him. As the principal disciple of Aoyama, Guananshan had a similar status as Lo Huainan in Zhongzhou School, so he had an extraordinary talent in cultivation. However, he seldom stayed behind closed doors to cultivate. Otherwise, he would have improved his cultivation state much faster. Wasn't he afraid that Zhuoruzhui would steal all the limelight after he came out from behind closed doors? Of course, he understood that Guananshan had many affairs to deal with. Besides the affairs of Liangwang Peak and Tianguang Peak, he also had to deal with their affairs. He said to Guananshan earnestly, "Thank you for your hard work." Guananshan understood what he meant, saying, "Though young Sister Bai is not here, the scenes she described are still very clear in my mind. Our two sects have many reasons to be friendly, but there is no reason to be hostile. We have to push forward this matter." According to the news from White Town, the Snowy Kingdom will be quiet for more than 100 years, and the underworld hasn't made any moves yet. We have enough time to sort out the internal affairs of the human race, so that we can deal with the great changes in the future. Tong Yen said, "The deviant sects have been weak for many years, and it will be hard for them to recover in a short time." Guananshan said, "So we still have to focus on Bulolin." Tong Yen asked, "Where is he now?" Guananshan said, "He is still a bit far from the seaside." Tong Yen said, "It has been 4 years, right?" "It is a bit slow," Guhan said. "That child is too stubborn and kind. He doesn't want to do many things, so it is hard for him to gain his trust." Tong Yen shook his head and said, "I don't think so. Only when he is sincere can he be true." Ma Hua, who had been silent all this time, said with a smile, "I agree. The more stubborn and eccentric he is, the less likely Bulolin will suspect him." Tong Yen said, "That's right, but it is indeed a bit slow. Maybe we should do something to help him." Guhan said, "What should we do? Should we help him become famous? The last thing Bulolin needs is fame." Tong Yen said, "The reputation of an assassin doesn't depend on himself, but on his target." Hearing this, Ma Hua's eyes lit up. Tong Yen stood up and left. Guananshan said, "Please tell fellow cultivator Luo not to worry too much about that matter. Cultivators will have a hard time if they bear too much." Tong Yen nodded. Guhan asked, "Where are you going, fellow cultivator Tong?" Tong Yen said, "I'm going to the Shinma Peak." It was quiet in the cliff cave for a while, and Guhan's expression was a bit weird. Guananshan said with a bitter smile, "The Shinma Peak doesn't accept visitors. What's the matter?" Tong Yen said, "I'm going to pray to Jingjiu." Guhan said, "I can't believe you want to go to the Shinma Peak to pray. Tong Yen is still so strange, but he is not so cold anymore. I wonder if it is because he lost to Jingjiu." Guananshan looked at him and said seriously, "He can call him that, but you should call him Senior Uncle Jing." Guhan's expression turned serious. He didn't dare to argue and said, "I'll remember. I've always had a vague idea in my mind, but I haven't been able to grasp it." Ma Hua suddenly said, "His unintentional words just woke me up." Guananshan looked at him and asked, "What's the idea?" Ma Hua told him his idea with a smile. Guananshan was silent for a long time and said, "It seems feasible, and there is no risk." Guhan also thought it was a good idea. He asked confusedly, "Since you've thought of it, why didn't you tell Tong Yen before? He and Lo Huainan are brothers. Wouldn't it be more convenient to tell him directly? And it would be safer." Ma Hua shook his head and said, "It's because they are brothers that I can't ask Tong Yen to tell him." Guhan immediately understood. Tong Yen and Lo Huainan were the representatives of the young disciples of Zhongzhou School. No matter how good their relationship was, they were natural competitors. Moreover, they didn't have the same master. Under such circumstances, they needed to avoid arousing suspicion. They couldn't do anything that might arouse suspicion. This kind of relationship was like the one between him and his brother of the concubine on the Shima Peak. Though the clan supported Gu Qing a lot, he wouldn't do anything about it either. That was not the foundation. The real relationship was the cultivation realm and the status in the sect. Don't tell Tong Yen about it. Guananshan said. Don't tell Shui Yu Nunnery or the Guoqing Temple either. I will ask for fellow cultivator Luo's opinion. If he agrees, we will proceed and inform the kid. Tong Yen went to the Shinma Peak. The disciples of Aoyama were surprised and curious about how he did it. After the death of Jingjiu, the Shinma Peak seemed to become a forbidden place again. Zhao Lei never came down from the peak, nor did he receive any visitors. The young master of the Platonist sect, Sensei Da, came to attend the ceremony. He had waited for a long time at the foot of the peak last night, but young Yuan brought him a sword, so he left in disappointment. Later, they learned that the reason Tong Yen went to the Shinma Peak was to worship Jingjiu. Thinking of the amazing chess game at the plum meeting, they thought they had understood something. Different from what they had imagined, the current Shinma Peak didn't have a life-or-death conversation between the two geniuses, nor did they reminisce. Everything was calm. Gu Qing led Tong Yen to walk around the halls and caves on the peak. "Can I have a look at Jingjiu's room?" asked Tong Yen. Gu Qing said, "My master seldom sleeps. He lies on the bamboo chair when he is tired." After a moment of silence, Tong Yen said, "He has cultivated so diligently that it's no wonder that he could amaze the world in the cultivation tournament." Gu Qing wondered how he should explain it to her. Tong Yen walked to the cliff's edge and stood behind Zhao Lei. "Does he really not play chess?" "No." Tong Yen didn't say anything more. It was quiet. A gentle breeze blew over. More than 10 days later, Zhao Lei and Gu Qing left the Shinma Peak together. According to the news from Tianguang Peak, she needed to go down the mountain to find a precious medicinal material in order to break through the free travel state. All the disciples of Aoyama, including Guananshan and Gu Han, were shocked by the news. Chapter 204. The Aoyama sect had a long history and profound resources, so it should have no shortage of magic pills and magic materials. Yet, there was nothing on Shiriyue Peak that Zhao Lei needed, because she practiced the tempered will of the sword. Besides, no one had practiced the Nine Deaths sword style except for the immortal Jingyang, so there was no preparation for it. Of course, the Aoyama sect would gather all the resources of the sect to help Zhao Lei look for the sword style for such an important event. However, no one could teach Zhao Lei the Nine Deaths sword style, so she had to comprehend it on her own. It was meaningless to practice hard at such a critical moment. Traveling around the world with the excuse of searching for the sword style might help her break through the state. After Zhao Lei and Gu Qing left Shinma Peak, they had a hot pot in Cloudy Town and stayed in Shangzhou for a while. They arrived in Nanhezu on the same night. Compared to the trip she and Jingjiu took many years ago, the trip this time was much faster, and it was much easier to ride the sword. The twilight shone on the gray walls of the precious treehouse, reflecting a strange color. There were no pedestrians on the surrounding streets, and it was eerily quiet. A few cultivation practitioners stood outside the wall, looking at the manager of the precious treehouse with a gloomy expression. "We have agreed to hold the auction tonight. Why did you suddenly stop?" The manager of the precious treehouse apologized profusely, saying, "Gifts will be sent to you later. Please forgive us, immortal masters, and we will come back in a few days." Under normal circumstances, these cultivation practitioners would take the gifts and leave without further ado, considering the background of the precious treehouse. However, they were determined to get a box of fairy lotus pills at the auction this time, and they needed it urgently, so they couldn't just leave. Our sect's elder Jiang is at the critical moment of breaking through the state of undefeated. How long do you want us to wait? A cultivation practitioner shouted at the manager sternly. The manager said calmly, "I'm sorry. We have to settle the accounts tonight, and we can't receive any honored guests." The cultivation practitioners were quite angry, thinking that the auction they had agreed on beforehand would be cancelled for such a trivial matter as settling the accounts. Suddenly, they felt a little strange. Although the precious tree house had a profound background, it rarely did such unreasonable things. Moreover, the manager's expression was too calm, as if he was sure that no matter how absurd the excuse was, he wouldn't worry about being criticized by the guests. One of the cultivators thought of a possibility and asked in surprise, "Could it be that an important person has come from the mountain?" The steward smiled faintly and did not reply. The cultivators subconsciously raised their heads to look at the top floor of the precious tree house in the sunset, but they were worried that the other party would perceive their gazes and feel disrespectful, so they quickly lowered their heads. "Then what are we waiting for? Quickly disperse. Manager, please inform me when the immortal lotus pill will be auctioned." The venerables, stewards, and guards of the precious tree house stayed on the lower 2 floors. The top floor was quiet. This was the tallest building in Nanhezu. Standing by the railing, one could overlook the whole of Chownan City under the setting sun. The scenery was breathtaking. The owner of the precious tree house wasn't in such a mood today. He didn't dare to look back either. He just stood in front of the door with his back bent, not daring to make any sound. He was a famous figure in Nanhezu and even in the whole of Chaotian, but he acted like a servant at the moment. The door was pushed open. Gu Qing walked out from inside and handed a portrait to the owner, saying, "Let me see if anyone has seen it." The owner of the precious tree house received the portrait with both hands reverently. Without delay, he trotted downstairs and pushed open the door to the deepest room on the 2nd floor. The room was spacious. More than 20 old men in green clothing were waiting in it, looking a bit nervous. These old men were the most experienced venerables of the precious tree house, and there were a few stewards with good eyesight. Even the venerables of the branch in Zhaoga City had come back. The owner of the precious tree house put the portrait on the table and made way for them, saying, "Whoever finds the clue first will be rewarded with a building." The venerables all knew that the building mentioned by the owner was not an ordinary residential building in Chownan City, but a branch of the precious tree house. How much would that building be worth? Of course, they would try their best to find the clue even if they didn't have the money, because the thing in the portrait was the future of the precious tree house. The old venerables gathered around the table and began to study the portrait carefully. The owner of the precious tree house retreated to the window, feeling stuffy, but he didn't dare open the window to get some fresh air. He took out a silk handkerchief from his sleeve and wiped the sweat off his forehead, thinking of a way to make up for it if he failed. He had sent too many gold and silver mountains to the Zhao Manor house in Zhaoga City in the last few years, and it wouldn't be a good idea to send more. Should he send them to the Gu clan? Yet, the eldest master had been treated badly in the clan, and it was unknown if he would appreciate it. A few years ago, the peak master of Bihu went mad and was suppressed by Yuan Qijing. The precious tree house lost its most powerful backer and was on the verge of collapse. Unexpectedly, Jing Jiu and Zhao Liu stayed at the precious tree house for a while on their first trip to the human world, and they even did this thing. Using this trivial relationship, the owner of the precious tree house forced his way into the Zhao Manor house in Zhaoga City. In the years that followed, the precious tree house dedicated themselves to the Zhao mansion, and their unremitting efforts were finally recognized by Shenhua Peak. Since then, the precious tree house had been responsible for providing all the needs of the Shenhua Peak. Of course, they had paid a huge price, but they had also kept some of the more important shares. It could be said that they had escaped the disaster. In the past few years, Shenhua Peak had been sealed again. Whenever there was a need, it was Gu Qing who requested it through the clan. A few days ago, the Precious Tree House received a letter from the Gu clan, saying that the Peak Lord would personally come here to look for something. Although the owner was shocked, he naturally attached great importance to this matter. If this matter wasn't handled properly, would the Precious Tree House still be able to continue operating? It should be three-leaf grass. Immortal Master might have remembered it wrongly. A white-haired old consecrator flipped through a yellowed book in his hand and said with certainty, "It's recorded in the Southern Heaven Medicine Trove. How can you believe the things recorded in those worthless wild herbs?" Another consecrator said, "How many treasures have we handled over the years? Look at all the people in the building. Who has seen it before? No one has even heard of it." Listening to these quarrels, the owner of the Precious Tree House looked a bit gloomy. He walked to the table and looked at the painting, saying, "It doesn't look special. Why don't I have any impression of it?" The painting was of a stalk of grass with 3 leaves. It was green and tender like a piece of jade. The consecrator said with a bitter face, "It's because it looks too ordinary that it's hard to tell. It can't really be a 3-leaf grass." The owner of the Precious Tree House said seriously, "I don't care what it is. I have to find it no matter what. Otherwise, even if I can survive, I want to die." Hearing this, the quarrels immediately stopped. The consecrators began to flip through the ancient books again, or frowned and thought hard, trying to find clues. The room became very quiet. Only the sound of turning pages could be heard. Time passed slowly. After an unknown amount of time, a surprised voice suddenly rang out. A deacon came to the table with a book in his hand. He directly opened one of the pages and said, "It's recorded in the miscellaneous examination of Yu Yang." Hearing the name of the book, everyone's expression changed slightly. They didn't have much confidence. There were too many supernatural things in the miscellaneous examination of Yu Yang. It was difficult to distinguish the real from the fake. Moreover, the text was rough and the description was boring. Few people would read it carefully. Dozens of eyes fell on that page. It was recorded very clearly in the book that a few hundred years ago, a strange grass had appeared by the shore of the great marsh. It had 3 leaves and there was nothing special about it. However, its green color was eye-catching, and even the cold wind and raging fire could not change it. This wild grass was judged by the doctor monk of the Guoqing Temple to be an extremely rare magic grass of the fairy realm, and was named the 3 Purities grass. It attracted countless sects and rogue cultivators to fight for it. The reason why no one in the cultivation world remembered this matter was that no tragedy of fighting for the treasure took place afterward, and also because the people present were asked not to disclose this matter. Who would have thought that it would be recorded by the scholars in the mortal world? "It's quite similar," the owner of the Precious Tree House said thoughtfully. The other consecrators also nodded. The miscellaneous examination of Yu Yang was not credible. The text was rough, but the description of this matter was very true. Who could make such a precious magic grass disappear just like that? And no sect dared to mention it? In the whole of the southern continent, only the Aoyama sect could do this. Who could make the Aoyama sect put so much effort just for a magic grass? In the whole of the 9 peaks, only the immortal Jingyang could do this. Of course, the immortal Jingyang practiced the 9 Deaths sword style. He needed it when he broke through the free travel state. A consecrator thought of something and asked confusedly, before the immortal Jingyang entered the free travel state, he was so dignified in the 9 peaks of Aoyama? The owner of the Precious Tree House knew a lot of secrets of Aoyama. He said, "Of course." "That's good." A consecrator said with lingering fear, "As long as we are sure that it really exists, we can find it." The owner of the Precious Tree House said, "Stop everything and try our best to find this 3 Purities grass. For an auction house of this scale and dozens of branches on the whole continent, how much loss would it cause if they stopped for one day?" But both the owner and the consecrators were calm, thinking that it was a matter of course. But there was a problem. Someone said worriedly, If the three purities grass is really so precious, even if we find it, we can't compete with those sections. The owner of the precious tree house scolded, "Idiot! When we find out where it is, the mountain will ask for it. It's not our turn. The 9 peaks of Aoyama now owe Master Jing a big favor. Who dares to refuse Master Zhao's request? The point is, we have to find clues. Money is not a problem. Do you hear me?" In the attic, the twilight was over, and the luminous pearl was emitting a faint light. There was a box on the table in front of Zhao Lei, which was also emitting a faint light. It should be some kind of tactical formation that sealed the spirit inside. Chapter 205. With the help of the three purities grass, it would be safer and smoother to enter the state of free travel with the 9 Deaths sword style. Jing Jiu was well aware of this, so how could he not be prepared? Even Zhao Lei didn't know how many other treasures were hidden on the top of Shinhua Peak. But now that she already had the three purities grass, why did she still need to look for it? Was it for Gu Qing? In the early morning, the owner of the precious tree house entered the room. His eyes were a bit red, indicating that he hadn't slept all night. But he was clean, and his temples were a bit wet, without any strange smell. It was said that the immortal masters of Aoyama preferred cleanliness. He was worried that his vulgar smell would offend her, so he took several baths and didn't dare to use any fragrant powder. In fact, facing Zhao Lei, this kind of worry was unnecessary. She didn't even look at him kneeling on the ground and said, "Many people should know about this, right?" The owner of the precious tree house stiffened slightly, and fear rose in his heart. Though the guardians and stewards of the house were loyal and obedient, who didn't care about the master of Aoyama's every move? Who could guarantee that no information would be leaked out? Zhao Lei handed the box to him and said, "There is a three purities grass in it." The owner of the precious tree house was even more shocked and confused, wondering what she meant. Zhao Lei said, "You will make it appear wherever I need to find it. Can you do that?" The owner of the precious tree house stared at the floor in front of him. He didn't dare to move his eyes, but his mind was racing. He didn't understand the purpose of this strange request, but he still answered without hesitation, "Yes." Gu Qing walked him out of the room. He bowed and said that he didn't dare to do that. "I saw that there were formations guarding the walls and windows of the precious tree house." Gu Qing asked, "What's so special about it?" The owner of the precious tree house said, "It's mainly used to isolate sound and breath." Gu Qing asked, "Will there be a warning if someone touches it?" The owner of the precious tree house didn't dare to guess the purpose of these questions, so he answered, "Yes." Gu Qing asked again, "Do the precious warehouse and the outer house use the same method?" The owner of the precious tree house said, "It's mainly used to conceal the breath of the treasures. Nothing else is required. So we all use the same formation provided by Ozawa." After a moment of silence, Gu Qing said, "I think you should know how to dismantle this formation without giving any warning." The owner of the precious tree house still couldn't figure out what he wanted to do, but his back was wet with sweat. He said in a slightly tense voice, "I have to." Zhao Lei and Gu Qing continued riding their swords to the north. They landed when they saw the large city in the distance. That was Zhaoga City. They landed on the ground not because they wanted to show respect to the imperial court, or because they were afraid that the Pure Heaven Bureau would misunderstand them, but because they had no intention of going to West Mountain residence. There was a manor outside Zhaoga City. It was unknown how much gold and silver had been used to build the manor, which was as beautiful as a fairyland. It was the second manor of the Zhao family. There was a lake in the Zhao garden, and there was only one boat in the lake. Zhao Lei sat at the bow of the ship, looking at the few pitiful clouds in the blue sky in silence. 3 years ago, she and Jing Jiu had a conversation on this ship. Following that, Jing Jiu left to attend to some matters. According to her calculations, he should have gone to Mount Li. Later, Shui Yu Nunnery Zemo she appeared and asked her to meet in the Mingtsue Valley on behalf of Guodong. As a result, the assassination attempt took place. Because of the assassination attempt, she couldn't participate in the law tournament. Because of the conversation on the ship, Jing Jiu took her place in the law tournament and never came back. This ship should have sunk long ago. Gu Qin closed his eyes and cultivated on the grass by the lake. There was no one in the Zhao garden. There wasn't even a servant. It was extremely quiet. As dusk fell, Zhao Leu and Gu Qin got up and left. They entered Zhaoga City before nightfall. It was still sunny outside the city gate. After walking through the long and gloomy city gate, the raindrops fell down, wetting their cheek. Zhao Leu remembered that it was spring. They stopped at the entrance of an alley amidst the pattering spring rain. They could see the black eaves of Taichung Temple in the distance. They looked more like the horns of an old dragon under the effect of the darkness of night and the rain. Zhao Leu walked up the stone steps and pushed a green brick on the wall 1 inch. She knew that a smooth stone ball would start rolling in a place she couldn't see, and then it would smash a precious ceramic bowl or basin. She didn't understand why Jing Jiu didn't use the formation when he told her about it. If it was just to listen to the sound, why did he use the precious ceramic ware from the official kiln? Later, she realized that the simpler the mechanism was, the more reliable it would be, and the more precious the object would be valued if it was destroyed. She and Gu Qin walked in as the gate of the courtyard was opened. She nodded to the family in the living room across the small garden, and then walked along the roofed corridor to the room. There was no bamboo chair in the room. There were a few inks on the shelf, and a chess set on the table. Gu Qin glanced at it twice, and was certain that it was the same chess set they had played on the chessboard mountain. Duke Lu walked out from a corner and said sentimentally, "I've known your father for many years, but I didn't expect to meet his daughter in this capacity." Gu Qin was startled, but he didn't say anything. Zhao Leu nodded slightly and said softly, "He said he could ask for your help if he needed any help." Duke Lu said, "Please tell me." Zhao Leu said, "I want to go to the palace." "You want to meet the emperor?" Duke Lu thought that she was qualified to meet the emperor in her current status, but since she wanted to arrange it himself, it meant that she wanted to meet the emperor in private. Zhao Leu said, "It's the royal concubine. Please arrange it." Duke Lu glanced at her meaningfully and said, "Okay." The royal concubine in the royal palace was none other than royal concubine Hu. Everybody knew it. The son of Duke Lu was lost in thought, thinking of what had happened in the palace over the last 3 years, especially royal concubine Hu's situation. It's not important why she wants to meet royal concubine Hu. Duke Lu knocked on the table lightly with his finger to bring his son back to his senses, saying, "What is the most important message from her appearance today?" The son was taken aback and then asked, "Our State Duke Manor has served the Shinma Peak for generations?" "That's right," said Duke Lu. The son was startled, saying, "Does it mean that the person who made the agreement with grandfather was the immortal Jingyang?" Duke Lu said, "There's no other explanation for it. What do you think?" The son laughed out and said, "What else can I think? I feel very good right now, and I even want to go out and shout, 'Who else is there?'" Duke Lu shook his head with a smile, reminding him, "The immortal Jingyang has already ascended." The son of Duke Lu couldn't help but feel regretful when he thought of this. How to arrange it? Even if the emperor trusts you, it's hard to arrange someone to enter the palace without anyone knowing. It was the emperor who Jing Jiu met when he entered the palace, and the situation was different. It's not difficult. When the emperor learned that she had left Aoyama and might come to Zhaoga City, he asked me to. Chapter 206. In the late spring, it was a bit hot and stuffy, and the atmosphere was a bit depressing. Royal concubine who reclined on the soft couch, her left sleeve hanging in front of her, covering her swollen belly. Normally, no imperial concubine in the royal palace could threaten her status and the safety of her unborn child, and she was under the care of the imperial physician and the female immortal master of the Zhongzhou school, so she should be in good health. But for some reason, her face was a bit pale and her expression was a bit haggard, and she didn't look very healthy. Even her temper was more irritable than before. She summoned all her servant girls to the front hall for a trivial matter that day. The voice of the messenger rang out outside the hall. Royal concubine who felt surprised. She stood up by holding the edge of the couch, and took 2 steps forward. Her movement was a bit awkward, but she did it on purpose so that the visitor would see her. She knew better than anybody else the status of Duke Lu in front of the Emperor. Seeing this, Duke Lu said hastily, "Please sit down, Your Highness." Royal concubine who sat down with a faint smile and asked mildly, "State Duke, do you have something to do today? Does the Emperor want to see me?" She felt a bit nervous, expectant, and uneasy when she asked the question. The Emperor hadn't come to the hall to see her for many days. "Your Highness, 2 guests want to see you." Having said that, State Duke Lu walked out of the Grand Hall without hesitation. Zhao Lei and Gu Qing walked out from behind the pillar. It was unclear how they got here. Royal concubine who didn't call out the assassins, nor did she call anyone. All she did was look at Zhao Lei in silence. They had met in the old plum garden 3 years ago, and they had a grudge against each other. Zhao Lei said, "You're much better than you were 3 years ago, since you're so calm under such circumstances." Royal concubine who shot her a sideways glance and said, "Even though you're the peak master of Aoyama, you can't get away with it if you're discovered sneaking into the palace in the middle of the night." Zhao Lei said expressionlessly, "I think you should be more worried about yourself." Hearing this, royal concubine who narrowed her eyes slowly. She was pregnant now and looked a little haggard, but the aura between her eyebrows was still naive and happy. When she narrowed her eyes, there was a kind of indescribable charm. Gu Qing turned around, no longer looking at her. Zhao Lei glanced at her abdomen and said, 3 years. Royal concubine who was furious upon hearing this. "It's none of your business," she snapped while gritting her teeth. Zhao Lei said expressionlessly, "This matter can't be hidden from anyone. There have been many discussions among the people, not to mention the officials in the court. If they knew that you are a vixen, would they let you give birth to this child?" Royal concubine who spat in front of the bed. "Pooh! Who doesn't know about this now? What am I afraid of?" Zhao Lei said, "Guessing and knowing are 2 different things. His Majesty dotes on you. As long as there is no evidence, the officials in the court will not dare to say anything." The meaning of this sentence was very clear. Nobody dared to accuse royal concubine who of being a vixen, because the emperor liked her, and there was no proof. Who would dare lift up the skirt of royal concubine who to see if she had a tail? However, the unborn child in her abdomen for 3 years seemed to be the best evidence at any time. Zhao Lei said, "Even if you have a good relationship with the Zhongzhou school and the Guoqing temple, what will be the impact of this matter at the critical moment?" She was also clear about what the critical moment meant. Royal concubine whose face grew pale as she said, "What should I do then? I don't want to do this, but I just can't give birth to the child. It might be because of the difficulty in giving birth to the demon fetus, or it might be a natural spiritual fetus, which means the pregnancy will take 10 years. Zhao Lei said, "His Majesty doesn't care about this. All he cares about is the discussion." How could she influence the discussion? In other words, who was qualified and able to change the identity of the child in her abdomen? Royal concubine who lifted her head to look at Zhao Lei, her eyes beaming. Zhao Lei said, "The affairs of the royal family have always been handled by the Zhongzhou school and the Guoqing temple, and our Aoyama sect won't interfere." Royal concubine who said with a disappointed expression, "Why did you tell me all this then?" Zhao Lei said, If Zen master says you are a good person, then you are a good person. Royal concubine, who of course knew this was the best way. In this regard, neither the sect master of Aoyama nor the sect master of Zhongzhou was as popular as Zen master. As long as Zen master said so, who would dare not believe that she was pregnant with a Buddha fetus, not to mention a natural spiritual fetus? But Zen master said that the cause and effect between us are over. He doesn't even want to see me, let alone speak for me. Royal concubine, who appeared very weak at the moment. Zhao Leo thought of a certain woman, raising her eyebrows slightly. The relationship between you and Zen master is over, but he still owes the Shenma Peak a favor. It was because of what had happened in the cultivation tournament of the plum meeting 3 years ago, or because of a story that happened a long time ago. Royal concubine, who understood now. After a moment of silence, she asked, "What do you want?" She was fully aware that the Aoyama sect must have a great demand for her since they had offered her such a great benefit. Yet, she had no idea what Zhao Leo wanted from her. She was the master of the Shenma Peak of the Aoyama sect. It was such a high status that she could ask for anything she wanted. Was it true that she needed some kind of grass like the rumor said? Zhao Lei said, back in the old plum garden, when Jing Xin and Lo Huainan met, they pretended that they didn't know each other. You wouldn't believe it. Royal concubine, who narrowed her eyes slightly, asking, "What are you trying to say?" Zhao Lei said, "It's meaningless for you to be on good terms with the Zhongzhou school. As long as Lo Huainan is there, the Zhongzhou school will support Jing Xin." Royal concubine, who said with a cold expression, "I just want to give birth to this child. I don't dare fight for anything." Gu Qing, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. He didn't turn around, looking at the darkness outside the grand hall. "I'm a son of a concubine, so I know what kind of life it is. I believe you don't want your child to live like that." After a moment of silence, royal concubine, who said, "But you have a good talent in cultivation, so your status in the clan is getting higher and higher. I believe my child will do the same." Gu Qing said, "Are you sure this child has a chance to show his talent? If the emperor wants you to have a child, he wants you to fight for it. If you don't fight for it, why do you want to have a child?" Royal concubine, who fell silent. It was quiet. This was a cruel but undeniable fact. It was a simple principle. For this reason, royal concubine, who had thought that the emperor would favor the child in her belly. Unexpectedly, the emperors will seem to have changed in the last 2 years, which made her feel even more uneasy. In fact, she, Zhao Lei, and Gu Qing had all misunderstood the emperor's intention. According to the emperor's original plan, as long as royal concubine who could give birth to the child and wait for a few years to confirm that the child was healthy, the emperor would remove Jing Xin from the position of prince and banish him to the Guoqing temple to shave his hair and become a monk, leaving no chance for him to fight for the throne. It was Jing Jiu's idea not to let Jing Xin inherit the throne. But Jing Jiu was gone. The emperor didn't believe that Jing Jiu would die, but he hadn't heard from him for 2 years. Anyone would have to consider the possibility. Without the firm and unreserved support of the Aoyama sect, the emperor would have to pay attention to the opinion of the Zhongzhou school. In a short time, royal concubine who had made up her mind. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Gu Qing turned around and said, "I want to know the whereabouts of Lo Huainan." Chapter 207. Royal concubine who had been on the Cloud Dream Mountain for many years. Even if Lo Huainan and many others supported Jing Xin, there should be many others who supported her. She said with narrowed eyes, "It's too dangerous to be discovered later." Gu Qing said, "The whereabouts we want are simple. First of all, he is not on the Cloud Dream Mountain, and second, it's not an emergency." Royal concubine, who was taken aback a bit, thinking it was indeed much simpler. As long as these 2 conditions were met, the whereabouts of Lo Huainan could be known. She stared into Zhao Leia's eyes and asked, "Don't you suspect that I'm the mastermind behind your assassination? Because you gave a sum of gold and silver to Shi Fengqian's adopted son?" Zhao Lei said expressionlessly, "Though you did it in an idiotic way, I'm not an idiot." A faint golden glow suddenly appeared in the darkness of night. Zhao Lei and Gu Qing halted their step. "It looks like the Peak Master has recovered from his injury." The person wrapped himself in a black cloak, looking even shorter and fatter. The light in front of the grand hall illuminated his face. He was Jin Mingqing, the master of the royal family. Gu Qing was very nervous, and his lips felt dry. Zhao Lei didn't say anything. Jin Mingqing took out a sword from under his cloak and handed it to her, saying, "The name of this sword is the first child." "I have a sword," said Zhao Lei. Jin Mingqing asked, "Wasn't the thoughtless sword lost in the snowland?" "I have my own," said Zhao Lei. Jin Mingqing said, "That sword is ordinary, and it can be recognized, unlike the first child's sword, which has been hidden in the royal palace for hundreds of years. Nobody remembers it." Gu Qing was alarmed, wondering if she wanted to kill someone with a borrowed sword. "If the emperor wants to kill someone, does he need someone else's help?" asked Zhao Lei. Jin Mingqing said slowly, "The emperor is the ruler of the world. It's inconvenient for him to do many things because of the word common." Zhao Lei didn't say anything more. She took the sword named the first child. Gu Qing glanced at her, a little surprised. He had been very opposed to entering the palace tonight. There were too many dangers and true cultivators hidden among the seemingly ordinary halls. It would be easy for these cultivators to destroy him and Zhao Lei. He even felt that it would be impossible for them to conceal their track. However, Zhao Lei was very calm, not worried at all, as if she knew something. What he did not know was that Zhao Lei had already guessed that Jing Jiu had left the Zhao Garden that day to go to Mount Li to see the emperor. There was a deep mountain to the north of Yu County. There was a cultivation sect called the North Brook sect. It was a peripheral sect of the Zhongzhou school. It was famous for its craftsmanship and tactical formations. One day in midsummer, more than 10 masters and disciples of the North Brook sect left the mountain and headed for Guiyun City. The North Brook sect had made 3 magic treasures of the Earth class this year. 2 of them were given to the Cloud Dream Mountain, and the last one was not compatible with the cultivation method of the sect. They were going to auction it at the Precious Ware Pavilion in Guiyun City. The Precious Ware Pavilion was as famous as the Precious Tree House of the Aoyama sect and the Outer House of Yamatsai. Of course, it had a profound background, being the property of the Hanshi Valley of the Cloud Dream Mountain. The North Brook sect did not expect that the most important magic treasure at the auction of the Precious Ware Pavilion was not produced by their sect, but a herb. What is that herb? Is it more important than the magic treasure of the Earth class? Anyway, it has nothing to do with us. I heard that the buyer has been confirmed. Who dares to bid in the Precious Ware Pavilion? Is it something that a Grand Master of the Ancestral Court wants? Uncle Master Lu, do you know about it? That herb caused a lot of speculation and discussion among the disciples of the North Brook sect. People looked at the skinny middle-aged leader and asked curiously. The Uncle Master Lu listened to these discussions and smiled without saying anything. He knew more than that. That herb should be the rumored 3 purities grass. Of course, it was qualified to be placed in the most important position in the auction. The Sword sect of Aoyama had released the news, so no one dared to compete with them for this herb. They just followed the rules of the Precious Ware Pavilion. There was a plain outside the valley, and the road to Guiyun City was smooth. The cicadas were chirping, as if they were seeing them off. Suddenly, the chirping of cicadas disappeared. Uncle Master Lu raised his eyebrows and said, "Be careful. Set up the tactical formation." It was the height of summer and the weather was hot. Why did the chirping of cicadas suddenly disappear? An extremely faint black fog floated into the valley. The newly grown fruits on the trees were crushed by the fog. The disciples of the Northbrook sect suddenly became serious. They took out their magic treasures as fast as they could and set up the defensive tactical formation. The black fog gradually dispersed, and several figures gradually appeared. Judging from their clothes and cold aura, they were not good people. I didn't expect that you would be so vigilant despite your low state. You could even discover our traces in advance. An indifferent old man said, "The young master wants the treasure you are carrying. Hand it over quickly." Uncle Master Lu said, "So you are the devils of the mysterious dark sect. This is Yu County, less than 3,000 miles away from the Cloud Dream Mountain. When did you become so bold?" The Central Prefecture is the Central Prefecture, and you are you. Even if we kill all of you, so what? Can the Taoists in the Cloud Dream Mountain come here? The old man was an elder of the mysterious dark sect, and his evil magic was extremely powerful. He didn't care about these masters and disciples of small sects, but he was a little afraid of the tactical formation of the Northbrook sect. For some reason, the mysterious dark sect was very eager to get the magic treasure of the Earth grade. They didn't buy it from the Preciousware Pavilion through the individual cultivators, but chose to rob it directly. The battle began. The air was torn apart and countless airflows collided with each other. The black fog became thicker and thicker, and the clear light emitted by the tactical formation of the Northbrook sect became dimmer and dimmer. The disciples of the Northbrook sect stood in the tactical formation, using their magic treasures to maintain the tactical formation. They were struggling under the attack of the people of the mysterious dark sect, and their faces became paler and paler. They had already sent out the signal for help, but they didn't know when their fellow disciples would come and help them. The elder of the mysterious dark sect looked at the scene in front of him coldly. He seemed calm, but he was actually a little anxious. This place was not far from the Northbrook sect. What if the other side came to help them? More importantly, it would be troublesome if the Cloud Dream Mountain was alarmed. Suddenly, a gap appeared in the tactical formation. The elder of the mysterious dark sect's eyes became cold. He turned into a black fog, broke through the clear light, and arrived among the disciples of the Northbrook sect. The black fog condensed again, and he showed himself. He attacked Uncle Master Lu with the streamer in his hand. Uncle Master Lu didn't dare to face such a magic treasure head-on. He retreated with the help of the magic treasure, and didn't care if the disciples who were maintaining the tactical formation were exposed. This was exactly what the elder of the mysterious dark sect wanted. He sneered, and the streamer wrapped around the disciple of the Northbrook sect who was closest to him. His streamer carried the evil chi of the earth and the evil chi of the blood. If an ordinary cultivator didn't have a magic treasure to protect himself, he would die if he touched the streamer. The disciple of the Northbrook sect looked ordinary, and his breath was ordinary. He was about to turn into a puddle of blood, but he seemed to be scared out of his wits, and didn't move an inch. The elder of the mysterious dark sect suddenly felt that something was wrong. Chapter 208. The elder of the mysterious dark sect screamed and spat out a black skull from his palm. He threw it toward the small bronze bell. A loud boom resounded. Violent waves of chi swept out in all directions like waves. The black fog in the valley was blown away, and the sunlight shone on the ground again. The black skull was broken into countless pieces, falling down like rain. The grass that touched it withered immediately. The small bronze bell flew back to the disciple of the Northbrook sect. Lo Huainan! The elder of the mysterious dark sect shouted angrily. Who would have thought that Lo Huainan, the head disciple of the Zhongzhou school, was hiding in the troop and disguised as an ordinary disciple of the Northbrook sect? It was a trap today. The elder of the mysterious dark sect didn't dare to stay any longer since his natal skull was destroyed. He shook his sleeves and turned into a black fog, rushing out of the valley. In his mind, no matter how high Luo Huainan's talent in cultivation was, his cultivation state was almost on par with his own. Since he was severely injured, Luo Huainan's injury would be severe as well. Given Luo Huainan's status, why would Luo Huainan take the risk to pursue him? Who would have thought that the small bronze bell turned into a flowing light and chased after the black fog? Luo Huainan didn't care about her own injuries and wanted to stop him. The booming sound came from outside the valley. Countless cliffs were overturned by the airwaves, and the dust was stirred up. Suddenly, a shrill scream was heard, and the black fog was evaporated by the sunlight. The flowing light turned back into the small bronze bell, floating in the air. It vibrated slightly and buzzed. The rust on the edge of the bell was obvious because of the evil qi. Luo Huainan fell back to the ground. Her face was pale, and there was blood everywhere in front of her. Obviously, she was badly injured. Seeing this, the disciples of the mysterious dark sect were terrified. They didn't dare to stay any longer and scattered like birds and beasts. Luo Huainan stopped the master and disciple of the North Brook sect, who were about to check her injuries, and said in a low voice, "Eliminate the evil." The master and disciple of the North Brook sect answered in unison, and started to chase after her with their magic treasures. An hour later, everyone returned to the valley. A total of 7 disciples of the Xianyin sect were killed in this battle, especially the death of the elder, which was an extremely important harvest for the orthodox cultivation world. The master and disciple of the North Brook sect looked at the figure of Luo Huainan and felt that she was very tall and mighty. Looking at the field outside the valley, Luo Huainan said, "It's a pity that Su Zai didn't do it in person. The information we received is not accurate." Hearing this, the master and the disciple of the North Brook sect were even more shocked. Now they knew that the target of Luo Huainan wasn't the elder of the mysterious dark sect, but the young master of the mysterious dark sect. The name of the young master of the mysterious dark sect was Su Zai, and he was very famous in the cultivation world. His talent was very high, and it was said that his talent was even higher than that of Luo Huainan. The master and disciple of the North Brook school thought that the rumor was true. According to the rumor, 3 years ago, Luo Huainan had another fortuitous encounter in the cultivation tournament in the snowfield. Otherwise, why would he be so calm and confident when mentioning Su Zai? Seeing Luo Huainan's pale face, Senior Master Lu remembered another rumor, saying uneasily, "Big Brother Luo, it's a bit far to go back to the Cloud Dream Mountain. Guiyun City is up ahead. Do you want to rest there for a night? There will be an auction at the Precious Warehouse tonight, and many orthodox cultivation sects will attend it. Even if you don't want to pay attention to them, but—" Before he could finish, Luo Huainan understood what he meant, saying, "That's fine. But I won't see those outsiders," she said. Hearing this, the master and disciple of the North Brook sect felt relieved. Otherwise, how could they bear the responsibility if something bad happened? There was a small courtyard in Guiyun City. The gate of the courtyard was tightly shut. The disciples of the North Brook sect were scattered around the small courtyard, watching the movement in the twilight vigilantly, discussing something in a low voice. "I heard that Bulo Lin offered a reward for Senior Master Luo's life, and the price he offered was a magic treasure of the heavenly state. I wonder if this rumor is true." "I'm afraid it's true. Otherwise, how could Senior Master Luo agree to Senior Master Lu's request to recuperate here based on his temperament? Senior Master Luo is regarded as a formidable enemy by the devil men of the deviant sects and has sworn to kill him, but he isn't afraid at all. He slays the devils and devils everywhere. It's really remarkable." It was quiet in the small courtyard. A gentle breeze blew over the flowering trees, making the afterglow on the trees more vivid. There was a well under the wall, from which the sound of water could be vaguely heard. Luo Huainan opened his eyes slowly, ending his recuperation. His face was still a bit pale. The dark banner of the elder of the mysterious dark sect was indeed tricky to deal with, and his injury couldn't be healed in a short time. Normally, the elder of the mysterious dark sect wasn't Su Zai, and it wouldn't be meaningful to kill him. He didn't have to take the risk to chase after him, but he was wounded so severely. Yet, he still did it. Just like what he said to the master and disciple of the Northbrook sect. He had to eliminate all the evils. Since he wanted to walk the path of the Xianxia, he couldn't care too much. He got up and walked to the window, looking at the well. The twilight shone on his face. Compared to 3 years ago, his countenance showed more vicissitudes, and the expression in his eyes showed more tiredness. He left the snowland through the seal of the 10,000 miles and returned to the Cloud Dream Mountain. In the following days, he had been cultivating diligently and traveling around. He was really tired, both physically and mentally. Such a busy and arduous period of cultivation had its benefits. It helped him to think of those things less often. The benefits he had obtained in the belly of the snowworm had been integrated with the magic method during these hardships, and his cultivation state had improved again. He was confident that he could defeat the young master of the mysterious dark sect, though his target today was neither the young master nor the elder of the mysterious dark sect. The setting sun was getting lower and lower, and it was gradually blocked by the courtyard wall. The flowering trees turned into an ink painting, and the sound of water in the well gradually quieted down. He left the window and came to the table. There was a bronze mirror on the table. He looked at his own face in the bronze mirror in silence. That face was a bit pale and unfamiliar. There was a painful expression and a hint of remorse in his eyes. If he had known that Junior's sister had 2 10,000-mile seals with her, why would he have done that? It turned out that Master was afraid that Master's wife would not agree, so he secretly gave the seal of the 10,000 miles to Junior's sister and asked her to give it to him at the critical moment. That cold fog was so terrible that Junior's sister received his signal for help and went through a lot of hardships to find him. This was called kindness as heavy as a mountain. But what did he do? How did he become such a shameless and lowly person? If he had known all this. But there was no if in the world. As Lo Huainan thought about these things, the emotions of self-blame and painful remorse kept alternating, and his face became even paler. There was a faint sound of wind outside the window, along with the sound of conversation. He came to his senses and knew that the disciples of the Northbrook sect were talking about him. He was touched and smiled. Of course he knew about that rumor. Bulow Lin wanted to kill him. This was true. But it was also false. And if Bulow Lin really sent assassins to kill him, they must be extremely powerful masters. How could these disciples of the Northbrook sect stop them? Again, there was no if. It was no coincidence that he had appeared here. Instead, he had done it on purpose. He had to leave the Cloud Dream Mountain, and it couldn't be an emergency. So he needed a trap as the antecedent, which was the trap of the Northbrook sect. Only in this situation could Bulow Lin find an opportunity to assassinate him. Chapter 209. Lo Huainan glanced at the man in black calmly. She must have known that he would appear. You have to deal with the water on you. Otherwise, if traces are left, everyone will know that you have been hiding in the well. He looked at the man in black and said, In the outside world's impression, I'm open-minded, but I'm cautious and prudent. I definitely won't forget to check the well. The man in black asked, Where should I hide? Lo Huainan said, In the cabinet. The closer you are, the more powerful the demonic art will be. This is also the style of your Bulow Lin. You try to get as close to the cultivation practitioners as possible. As for how to conceal your breath, you can blame it on some magic treasures. The man in black looked down at his wet clothes. A faint flame appeared in his eyes, but it was very beautiful and looked a bit weird. In a short time, the water on his body evaporated into smoke and disappeared without a trace. Seeing this, Lo Huainan slightly raised her eyebrows and asked, "Is this the demonic fire?" The man in black didn't answer her question. He looked at the water marks on the ground and reached out to get rid of them. Lo Huainan shook his head and said, "It may alarm the fellow Taoists outside. Let it do it by itself." From the well to the house, there were wet footprints on the ground of the courtyard. Naturally, it would take much longer for the wind to dry them than for the demonic fire to dry them. It would take some time. Lo Huainan wasn't worried about alarming the people outside because he had set up a formation to isolate breath in the courtyard. He just wanted to talk to the man. He hadn't talked to anyone for a long time, and he was very interested in the identity of the man in black. "This is the first time we've met. I didn't expect it to be under such circumstances." Lo Huainan said to the man in black, "You've worked hard all these years." The man in black said, "Not at all. It's just that it doesn't feel good to be misunderstood." Lo Huainan said, "Jingjiu is a good man. I think you might have misunderstood him. Anyway, it's all a misunderstanding. Don't blame him." The man in black was silent for a while and said, "Let's begin." The wet footprints on the ground had already faded. When they were done, they should all disappear. Lo Huainan's finger fell on the table and she said, "You can't use the power of the monster dawn for the first time, because our Zhongzhou school is very sensitive to the cultivation methods of the evil sections." The man in black said, "I know how to use a sword." Lo Huainan raised her hand. The black-clothed man summoned his flying sword and silently cut the spot where his finger had just landed. "This level is very suitable. It's just enough for us to suspect you." Lo Huainan felt the faint Aoyama sword will in the smooth crack on the table, and her mood changed slightly. It had been a few years, but not only did the other party's swordsmanship not fall behind, he even became more proficient in it. If he had stayed in Aoyama to continue learning the sword, who knew how far he would have progressed by now? He said, "If I dodge your sword, I will use the Bell of the North time to counterattack. What will you do?" The man in black said, "Since I want to kill you, I won't hide." "Very good. It will be easier for us to develop this way." Lo Huainan walked to the other corner of the room and said, "I won't choose to fight you to the death. I will use the escape method of heaven and earth to come here. Can you predict that?" The man in black walked over and said, "I can't, but there is a corresponding escape method in the blood magic. I should be able to follow you in a small area." "What level have you cultivated the blood magic to?" 4 levels. Lo Huainan thought that he was indeed someone with natural Tao quality. Even if he abandoned Tao halfway and became a demon, he still improved so quickly. As long as she did not use any hidden methods, it was understandable that she would be seriously injured by the other party. "How badly do I need to hurt you? Cut off an arm." The two continued to discuss, gesticulate, and design. After confirming all the details, the man in black walked to the wardrobe. He suddenly stopped and asked, "Why are you willing to do such a thing? In the world of orthodox cultivation, I am the most famous now." Lo Huainan said with a self-mocking smile, "If I am assassinated by Bulow Lin's assassins, it will be the most eye-catching thing. It will be enough to help you." The man in black said, "What I mean is, why do you want to do such a thing?" Lo Huainan was silent for a while and said calmly, "Someone has to sacrifice, and I won't really die." The man in black said nothing more. He walked into the wardrobe and closed the door from the inside. The night grew darker. Lo Huainan walked to the table and sat down. She looked at herself in the mirror, closed her eyes, and began to wait. The auction of the Precious Ware Pavilion was about to begin. Many people already knew what the most important treasure was. Countless eyes fell on the box in the middle. Everyone knew that no matter how precious the treasure in the box was, no one would participate in the auction, because it was a 3 purities grasp. Many people also guessed who was in the room on the top floor, but they could only pretend that they did not know. The room was very quiet. Gu Qing didn't sit down. Even though he was sure that the formation of the precious ware pavilion could prevent the situation in the room from being noticed by the outside world, he was still a bit nervous. There were 2 cups of sparrow tongue tea on the table. He was the only one in the room. In a residential area of Guiyun City, there was only one person here. Zhao Leu, dressed in black, sat on the ground with her legs crossed, in front of a window. There was a street outside the window. There was a small courtyard 100 feet away, and a disciple of the Northbrook sect was standing outside the courtyard. She was sure that Lo Huainan was in that small courtyard. After 3 years, she combed her hair again, tied it up in a braid, and wore a conical hat. The sword in the sheath exuded a faint and cold energy. It was the first child sword given to her by Jean Mingqing. She was waiting for that moment. She didn't know exactly when. Lo Huainan didn't know either. Since it was a play, it had to be very real and sudden. At some point in time, a small round hole had appeared on the door of the wardrobe. A flash of sword light flickered and then died out, brushing past Lo Huainan's body, cutting off a corner of her sleeve, and then a corner of the table. Lo Huainan stood up, and the bell of the north came out noiselessly, striking at the man in black who came out of the wardrobe like a ghost. The man in black didn't dodge. He grabbed with his right hand, and dozens of jets of demon fire gushed out, covering Lo Huainan. Lo Huainan employed the escape method of heaven and earth, disappearing from her original spot miraculously, and then reappearing in another corner of the room. The 2 flames in the eyes of the man in black became wild. A jet of black flame spread out from his body, rolling over the ground like a thick fog. His body disappeared instantly, and then reappeared in front of Lo Huainan. Lo Huainan didn't say anything, nor did the man in black. They were both very calm. If anyone saw this scene, they would feel it was very weird. There were traces of demon fire everywhere in the room. The legs of the table began to burn, emitting a burning smell. Soon, the disciples of the Northbrook sect outside the courtyard would be alerted. Seize the time. Lo Huainan signaled with her eyes. The man in black raised his hand, and dozens of jets of demon fire shot towards her. Lo Huainan leaned to the side, not dodging, and waited for his hand to fall. The man in black showed hesitation in his eyes. Lo Huainan misunderstood his meaning, and nodded with a smile. The man in black's hand fell. It fell on Lo Huainan's chest. There was a muffled sound. A trickle of blood flowed out from the corner of Lo Huainan's mouth. According to the original plan, he should counterattack and break the man's left arm, then the man would leave and the show would end. Lo Huainan suddenly felt something was wrong, and looked into the eyes of the man in black. The man in black's eyes were bloodshot, and he seemed to be a bit crazy. He didn't stop, and his right hand was still pressed against Lo Huainan's chest. The devilish flames with terrifying destructive power poured into Luo Huainan's body incessantly. Could it be that I've gone mad? Lo Huainan thought. The man in black's demon fire suddenly became several times stronger. His blood demon technique has at least reached the 5th level. So you want to kill me, Lo Huainan thought. There was a complicated emotion in his eyes, not sure if it was disappointment or something else. The demon fire with endless killing intent had already invaded his meridians, causing irreparable damage. Lo Huainan's face paled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood that contained the true power of Zhongzhou School's mysterious technique fell on the face of the man in black like an arrow, riddling the black cloth with holes. The black cloth fluttered like a butterfly, and the man's face was revealed. The face was a bit dark, but it was clean, giving off a familiar feeling. Chapter 210. Lu Shui, who hadn't appeared for a long time, was no longer a teenager. His expression was still calm, but the wildfire in his eyes was somewhat crazy. After being pushed back by Lo Huainan's blood arrow, He attacked again with the help of the demon fire on the ground. His flying sword slashed down. At the same time, his right fist punched at Lo Huainan's face with burning black smoke. Lo Huainan's meridians were damaged, but he had forced the demon fire out of his body with that mouthful of blood. His Taoist heart was clear, and he called back the North Time bell. A gorgeous stream of light illuminated the small courtyard that was shrouded in darkness. With a loud bang, the courtyard wall was completely shattered. The violent airwave rolled up the gravel and shot out in all directions. The disciples of the Northbrook sect who were guarding outside the courtyard fell to the ground and passed out. Lo Huainan's state was much higher than Lu Shisui's. Even though he was severely injured, Lu Shisui couldn't fight against him head-on. Lu Shisui's flying sword was cultivated again after he left Aoyama. Its rank was ordinary, so it was instantly destroyed into countless pieces. The North Time bell broke through the demon fire and hit his chest heavily. Lu Shisui vomited blood and retreated. Lo Huainan was injured twice in a row today, especially when he was sneak attacked by Lu Shisui. His injury was even more serious. For safety reasons, he didn't want to stay any longer. He used the escape method of heaven and earth to avoid the demon fire in the courtyard and flew to the sky to leave. A stream of sword light suddenly appeared and directly penetrated his body. That stream of sword light was extremely cold and faint, and it was hard to notice. Lo Huainan groaned. Looking at the inconspicuous house on the ground, he waved his sleeves and rose. A stream of light attacked the house. There was still a strong enemy hiding. He had to leave with the North Time bell even though he had to endure the pain. 2 black flames appeared under Lu Shisui's feet. He jumped to the sky and hugged Lo Huainan's leg. Lo Huainan hit his back with his palm. Normally, this palm strike would have definitely killed Lu Shisui. However, due to his severe injuries, the power of this strike was much weaker. Lu Shisui coughed up blood, but he did not let go. His hands were as hard as iron. The houses across the street collapsed. The flowing light of the North Time bell was shattered by the cold flying sword that returned from the sky. A black-clothed man wearing a bamboo hat stepped through the air. How did she do it without a sword? Lo Huainan knew that the most crucial moment had arrived when she saw the man in black approaching at high speed. He had used his most deeply hidden technique that he had yet to fully grasp. His face turned even paler. A small golden man appeared in his eyes. He pointed a finger in the air, and a beam of light that looked like gold and jade shot out. The beam of light contained a supreme pressure that was definitely not at the level of a golden core cultivator. It directly enveloped an area of more than 100 feet. No matter how fast the black-clothed man's movement technique was, he was unable to dodge it. What happened next was once again beyond his expectations. The black-clothed man wearing the bamboo hat suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, she appeared in front of Lo Huainan, bringing with her a dozen or so sword glows. Those sword glows came from her body. Even the escape technique of heaven and earth was only SOSO. Invisible sword body. Lo Huainan recalled a certain scene that Guananshan had once told him and was abnormally shocked. He looked at the eyes of the person under the bamboo hat and guessed who she was. Zhao Lei. With a howl, he brought his 10 fingers together. The night sky warped and the wind howled. It was like 2 invisible mountains were pressing down on Zhao Lei. Zhao Lei did not dodge and took the blow head-on. Lo Huainan's hand gripped her neck. His hand was covered in wounds and spurting blood. If he used even the slightest bit of force, Zhao Lei would die. But it was too late. Lu Shisui's fist, covered in black demonic flames, landed on his abdomen like an azure dragon. There was a loud boom. The night clouds were blown away by the strong wind. A cracking sound could be vaguely heard. The whole city was alarmed. Pierced through by the first child's sword and then struck by the bloody demonic technique, Lo Huainan's golden core could no longer bear it and shattered. His face was pale and his fingers loosened. Zhao Leo's fingers brushed past him like the wind. A bloody mark appeared on his neck. The bloodstains spread at an extremely fast speed. Crack! It was cut off. Pop, 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 pop. Four crashing sounds rang out in the ruins of the small courtyard. Lo Huainan's head and body could be seen in the dust. Lu Shui and Zhao Lei stood up. He spat out another mouthful of blood. Zhao Lei did not. Her face under the bamboo hat was a bit pale. She reached out her hand to call back the first child sword. Lu Shui reached out his hand to take it. The two looked at each other and disappeared into the darkness. On the top floor of the precious warehouse, Gu Qing walked to the window and started to dismantle the tactical formation outside the window attentively. His hands left many residual shadows behind. It was not hard to imagine how fast he was. The boss of the precious treehouse was right. He had confirmed this fact when he dismantled the tactical formation, and for some reason, the wills of the inherited heaven sword seemed to be especially suitable for setting up tactical formations. The window was opened a little bit. Zhao Lei showed up in the room. The sword lights in her clothes and hair gradually disappeared. Gu Qing rearranged the tactical formation outside the window and turned to walk to her. He took out a box and put it in front of her mouth. Zhao Lei spat out a mouthful of blood into the box. Then she tore off her black clothes and threw them into the box as well. The sword fire lit up. In an instant, the blood and the black clothes in the box were burned to ashes. Gu Qing felt a bit relieved. Later, he would plant the 3 purities grass in the ashes. After shielding its energy, nobody would be able to detect anything unusual. It wasn't until they were done that the cultivation practitioners in the precious warehouse realized what was going on. They must be heading in that direction. Gu Qing glanced at Zhao Lei. Zhao Lei said, "There are still some problems, but they're not our problem." "Who is that person?" asked Gu Qing. "Lu Shui," answered Zhao Lei. Gu Qing was a bit surprised and said with mixed feelings, "Yes, only we would do such a thing." After a while, he asked again, "But how did that guy figure it out?" "He didn't figure it out," said Zhao Lei. "He designed this trap." In the ruins, Lo Huainan's body was separated from his body, and he was no longer breathing. A nascent soul quietly floated out from the place where his neck was cut off. The Yuanying was very small, emitting a faint golden light. It looked very fragile, as if it could be annihilated by the night wind. The Yuanying floated into the well. The light of the sword and the magic treasures illuminated the ruins of the small courtyard. Many cultivation practitioners came from the precious warehouse. The Yuanying didn't dare to show up because it was too weak and could disperse at any time. Besides, it didn't dare to trust anyone. Tonight was a trap that he and Guananshan had discussed, but it turned out to be a real trap. Did the Aoyama sect want to kill him? The Yuanying sank to the bottom of the well and went against the current. It went out of the city and into the river. It floated to a deserted place and headed for the Cloud Dream Mountain in the north. More than 10 quiet peaks appeared under the night sky. This place was still far away from the center of the Cloud Dream Mountain. The Yuanying flew to the bottom of the precipice and entered a manor cave covered by vines. It activated the inhibition formation with its breath. A small green bottle was placed on a stone table in the deep part of the manor cave. The small green bottle was made of glass or jade, but it was emitting a faint luster. This was a magic treasure that he was extremely lucky to find. It could collect the spiritual aura of heaven and earth to nourish the Yuanying. As long as the Yuanying entered the small green bottle, he didn't have to worry about the Yuanying dispersing and dying. Lo Huainan's Yuanying floated to the top of the small green bottle. Suddenly, dozens of extremely thin rays of light floated up from the table and turned into a net, trapping the Yuanying. The rays of light were very straight, looking like the lines on a chessboard. The intersection of the lines condensed into dew-like light spots. They looked very solid like chess pieces. The The Yuanying showed a frightened expression on its face. It wanted to struggle out of the net. Chi. The rays of light landed on the Yuanying's body, making a burning sound. The Yuanying showed a painful expression. Its origin was damaged, so it became even dimmer. Chapter 211. Lo Huainan's nascent soul stopped struggling. The chessboard-like net of light stopped shrinking. Yuanying floats in the air above the little green bottle and looks at Tong Yen, who walks to the table with a puzzled expression. This kind of emotion was very faint, because the nascent soul had just been born, so it was very faint to begin with. Tong Yen sits on the stone bench, and her eyes are at the same level as her nascent soul. The appearance of Yuanying is somewhat similar to that of Lo Huainan, but it is much more immature. Looking at Tong Yan's face from a very close distance, the picture is somewhat interesting. It turns out that you have secretly raised your Yuanying. No wonder you rarely stayed in the Cloud Dream Mountain in the past 3 years. Is this the last retreat that you have prepared for yourself? I don't even know what you're talking about. Hurry up and let me go. What I'm trying to say is that you killed my junior sister, so your conscience is uneasy and you are terrified. You don't even dare to let the two masters know that you are raising a nascent soul. Yuanying was silent for a while, then said, Junior Martial's sister indeed died to save me. It's not wrong to say that I killed her. Tong Yen shook her head and said, You know what I mean. There's no need to say these words. The Yuanying angrily said, Do you want to say that I killed Junior sister? Tong Yen said, If that's not the case, what are you afraid of? Why do you have to hide the fact that you're raising a nascent soul? Yuanying stared into his eyes and said, Are you crazy? Why would I kill Junior sister? Tong Yen said, Of course it's for the 10,000-mile seal. The Yuanying revealed an absurd expression and said, There are 2 10,000-mile seals. Even Master doesn't know that the sect leader secretly gave his 10,000-mile seal to Junior sister. Of course, this was prepared for you. If you don't know about this, then you have a reason to kill him and steal his treasure. The other possibility is more likely. Although there are 2 10,000-mile seals, there are 3 of you. How are you going to split them? Tong Yan's voice was emotionless, and her expression was very calm, as if she was talking about something very ordinary. Yuanying sneered and said, Those are all excuses. You're just jealous of me because Junior sister would rather die so that I could live. Tong Yen said expressionlessly, According to the content of your story, the object of my jealousy should be Jingjiu. Yuanying asked, What do you mean? Tong Yen said, Sect head loves you too much and Master is too sad to suspect you. But I'm different. I don't like you. I've been thinking about this matter for the past 3 years. I've been thinking about what role you played in it. After I figured it out, I began to think about how to kill you quietly. The cave abode became very quiet. There was no sound for a long time. The emerald green bottle reflected the light and painted the stone walls as if they were in the netherworld. Lo Huainan's nascent soul was already dim. Now that it was smeared with a touch of green, it looked even more ferocious. This trap was indeed set up by you. Yes, it has nothing to do with Guananshan and the others. This trap is actually very simple. I just said a few words on Liangwang Peak. A smart person like Ma Hua, who is used to taking unconventional approaches, will naturally think of this method. Tong Yan's tone was very calm, without any sense of mockery. Yuanying said after a moment of silence, That fat pig was played by you like a marionette, but he was still so proud of himself. Tong Yen said, Lu Shui can kill Guananshan, and the plot of a fellow disciple killing each other is also a sensational plot. But Ma Hua will definitely suggest you because he wants to please you. Yuanying said, This is a risky thing. How can it be called please? Tong Yen said, Ma Hua knows your name and will accept this proposal. He will even thank him. I told you that he is really smart. Yuanying asked, I don't understand why you are so sure that Lu Shui will take this opportunity to kill me. When Lu Shui was expelled from Aoyama, Jingjiu's behavior proved the relationship between them. Tong Yin said, "We all know what kind of person Lu Shui is, so we chose him to go to Bulolin. How can such a person not do something for Jingjiu?" Yuanying said, "But why does he think that Jingjiu's death has something to do with me?" And Zhao Liu, "I know you have been to Shenhua Peak. How did you convince her?" Tong Yin said, "I don't need to convince her, because she doesn't believe your story. Lu Shui knows Jingjiu, so he won't believe it either." Yuanying said, "Do you also know Jingjiu?" Tong Yin said, "I have played chess with him, and I have never seen such a ruthless person." Yuanying said with slight mockery, "You are indeed a chess player. You like to think about these things, but I didn't expect that you would set up a trap to kill me for Jingjiu." Tong Yin said, "I did it for my younger sister." Yuanying was silent for a while and suddenly said, "Don't kill me." Tong Yin said, "I don't think you can find a reason to convince me." Yuanying said sincerely, "If good and evil can be calculated, I must be a good person, because I have done countless good things and only one bad thing. Even if you want to make my younger sister's death more worthwhile, you should let me live. I have sincerely repented now. Haven't I proved myself in the past 3 years?" Tong Yin said, "This is also what I don't understand. How can you keep your Taoist heart after doing such a shameless thing? Your behavior in the past 3 years is too strange, including your agreement with Liangwang Peak's plan and your willingness to be seriously injured by Lu Shui. You are too brave and fearless, and it seems that you really want to be like the Broadsword King." "Why?" Yuanying asked attentively, "Do you understand the reason now? I want to know it too." Tong Yin said, "That's because you want to suffer and be hurt, so that you can offset your past sins and calm your Taoist heart." Yuanying was silent for a long time and said, "I see. Why? You are fearless of death now, but why did you make such a shameless choice at that time?" Tong Yin asked while staring into Yuanying's eyes. Lo Huainan's newborn Yuanying was very fragile and should have died in this trap. The reason why he could live until now was that he wanted to know the answer. Yuanying sighed and said, "Before life and death, it is easy to be generous, but difficult to be calm." Tong Yin asked, "How long did you stay in the snowworm's stomach?" To be exact, it was less than half a day, but I felt like it was half a lifetime. Lo Huainan was silent for a while and continued, "The higher the state of cultivation, the fewer emotions there are, but I can't get rid of those emotions. That was the fear of ending one's life. Magnificent martyrdom and brave sacrifice were also the independent judgment of each person. Lo Huainan didn't know what was right, but he made his own choice. In fact, it wasn't until you asked me this question that I realized I wasn't wrong. Cultivation practitioners should be greedy for life and afraid of death." He said, "My only mistake was that I shouldn't have faced the test of life and death ignorantly and fearlessly, but I should have stayed away." Tong Yin said, "Maybe what you said makes sense, but since you chose to face the test of life and death, but you didn't pass the test, you have to pay the price." Lo Huainan was silent for a long time and said, "If there is an afterlife, I hope I can see you again." Tong Yin dropped his eyelids slightly and said, "Forget it." Dozens of rays of light fell inward like a chessboard. There were several sizzling sounds. Chapter 212. Guiyun City was an ordinary place, but it had become the most famous place in Chaotian overnight. Since the early morning, countless gazes, flying carriages and sword lights had been focused on the city. The atmosphere in the city was exceedingly depressing. Even the dogs didn't dare bark, hiding in their holes with their tails between their legs. Countless figures could be seen on the dewy green stone slabs. It was unclear how many people were searching in the streets and alleys. The Pure Heaven Bureau started investigating the case and forbade anyone from leaving the city. The ruined small courtyard became a forbidden place, and nobody was allowed to get close to it. The glows of the precious pearls could be seen from time to time in the ruins, and the panting sounds of the sniffing dogs could be heard once in a while. The disciples of the Zhongzhou school guarded the surroundings of the ruins, their eyes full of anger and grief, and a hint of bewilderment could be seen in the depths of the ruins. Had Big Brother died like this? How could it be possible? A skinny old man hovered in the sky above the ruins of a residential house 100 feet away, his expression terrible, exuding a gloomy energy from all over his body. He was Elder Rin Qianzhu of the Zhongzhou school, with a profound cultivation state, having reached the upper limit of the Huashan state a long time ago. Anybody could imagine the impact of the death of Lo Huainan on the Zhongzhou school, and Rin Qianzhu's mood at the moment. The crowd didn't even dare take a look at him, to say nothing of consoling him. Rin Qianzhu suddenly withdrew his energy and said while looking at the source of the sunlight, "He's here." Hearing this, the official by his side was taken aback slightly, and then approached him. The official was the chief commander of the Pure Heaven Bureau, Zhang Yai, an important figure in the imperial court. He came here the same night after hearing the bad news. Like the previous chief commanders of the Pure Heaven Bureau, he was also a graduate of the Zhongzhou school. A small green curtain sedan landed amid the morning sunlight in the east. Zhang Yai didn't know the identity of the person in the sedan, wondering why the sect master couple didn't come when such a shocking event had occurred. Ren Qianzhu had a high cultivation state and a high status, but he showed great respect to the small green curtain sedan, saying, "Thank you, Senior Master." The morning wind ruffled the green curtain sedan. A gentle voice came out from the sedan, expressing her condolences to the cultivationists of the Zhongzhou school, and that she needed to check on the sedan quietly. Ren Qianzhu led the small green curtain sedan to the ruins of the small courtyard, and then led his disciples to hide on the street. Zhang Yai asked in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Brother, this is?" Ren Qianzhu said, "The Grand Elder of Shui Yu Nunnery." Zhang Yai was slightly startled when he heard this, thinking what kind of status does Taishang Elder Shui Yu Nunnery have that he actually rushed to Hohhot City so quickly. He must have been personally requested by the sect head. His line of sight passed the half-collapsed courtyard wall and landed on the small green curtain sedan, giving him a glimmer of hope. The murderer had concealed his energy so well that the Pure Heaven Bureau couldn't find any trace of him even with the help of many magic treasures. He should be an experienced killer in the killing circle, but Shui Yu Nunnery was an expert in the two worlds connection, so he must have found something. Why were there so many cultivators in the city last night? Ren Qianzhu asked. Zhang Yai had already received his subordinate's report and told him about the precious artifact pavilion's auction. Ren Qianzhu's expression turned slightly cold as he said, "I want to see those people." Thinking of that troublesome matter, Zhang Yai said in a low voice, "Everything else is fine, but the master of the Shinma Peak of the Aoyama sect is here. Big Brother, don't be impulsive." Ren Qianzhu was taken aback, asking, "Why is she here?" It was then that the small green curtain sedan left the ruins of the small courtyard. Zhang Yai and Ren Qianzhu walked to the front of the sedan before he had time to respond. There are traces of the devil fire and the energy of the bloody demon method, so they should be the remnants of the deviant sections. But there are still two things that I don't understand. The gentle voice in the small green curtain sedan grew lower, as if this Grand Elder of Shui Yu Nunnery also felt it odd. The expressions on Zhang Yai and Ren Qianzhu's faces grew more serious, not daring to miss a word. "One of the sword wills is very faint, but they belong to the Aoyama sect. The other sword will is obviously unfamiliar, but it feels like I have seen it somewhere before." Hearing this, Zhang Yai suddenly felt the morning wind on his face became exceedingly cold, even a bit cutting. Years ago, when Zhao Leia was assassinated by a Yuanying elder of Zhongzhou school in Mingtsue Valley, it caused a great disturbance. Today, Lo Huainan was dead. He was born in Zhongzhou School, but he was an official of the imperial court, so he naturally didn't want the situation to develop in this direction. Hearing this, Ren Qianzhu's expression became even more indifferent. He bowed to the small green curtain sedan, saying, "Thank you for your hard work, senior." A sigh came from the small green curtain sedan, rising against the morning wind and gradually disappearing in the morning glow. Without hesitation, Zhang Yai turned around and stood in front of Ren Qianzhu, staring into his eyes, saying, "Senior brother, please calm down first." Ren Qianzhu snorted coldly, waving his sleeves angrily. Zhang Yai couldn't stop him, so he had no choice but to dodge. Ren Qianzhu's figure suddenly became vague, disappearing from where he was. After a few breaths, a gust of wind rose in the precious ware pavilion 10 miles away. Ren Qianzhu's figure appeared, looking upstairs, and shouted sternly, "Zhao Liu, come out!" This shout was like a thunderclap, and it didn't stop for a long time. A gust of wind rose in the building, the beams and pillars creaked, the horizontal board fell, and the smoke and dust rose everywhere, as if the building was about to collapse. The boss of the Precious Ware Pavilion had just arrived in the early hours of the morning, and he was having a headache because of this matter. When he found that someone was making trouble, he was extremely angry. He came to the railing and looked downstairs. Seeing Ren Qianzhu's figure, his expression changed abruptly, and he knelt on the ground. Seeing this scene, the rest of the cultivators guessed the identity of the old man, showing a frightened expression on their faces. They saluted and avoided, looking at the top of the building subconsciously. The sound of the door opening came from the top of the building. Zhao Lei walked out, followed by Gu Qing. She walked to the railing, looking down at the elder of Zhongzhou School with an indifferent expression. "Where were you last night at the beginning of the morning?" Ren Qianzhu stared at Zhao Liu upstairs and asked, his eyes extremely cold. The beginning of the morning was the time confirmed by the disciples of the North Brook School outside the small courtyard, and it was also the time when the entire Hohhot city heard the loud noise. And it was also the time of death of Lo Huainan. Zhao Lei didn't say anything. "Are you asking for help or interrogating a criminal?" Gu Qing took a step forward and came to the railing, saying, "If it's the former, we can cooperate with you. If it's the latter, why do you ask?" Ren Qianzhu ignored him, staring at Zhao Liu, and said in a low voice, "The murderer who killed my martial nephew Luo left a sword will of Aoyama. How do you explain that?" Hearing this, the cultivators in the building and the stewards of the Precious Ware Pavilion were extremely shocked, wondering what was going on. "You have an old grudge against our Zhongzhou School, and you happen to appear in this small town without any reason. Of course I have to ask you." Ren Qianzhu stared at Zhao Liu and said harshly, "You can't answer or you dare not answer. Don't think that I can't do anything to you just because you are the peak master of Aoyama." Some of the cultivators participating in the auction wanted to explain why Zhao Liu showed up here, but they couldn't speak under the pressure of the elder in the Huashan state. As a gust of wind arose, the chief commander of the Pure Heaven Bureau, Zhang Yai, had finally arrived. He walked to the back of Ren Qianzhu and said something to him in a low voice. Ren Qianzhu narrowed his eyes slightly, and the pressure he exuded lessened a bit. The disciples of the Zhongzhou School and the officials of the Pure Heaven Bureau had also arrived, and learned the reason for the event. The 3 Purities grass was one of the auction items at the Precious Ware Pavilion last night. The whole cultivation circle knew that Zhao Liu needed the 3 Purities grass to break through the free travel state. As such, it was natural for her to show up here. The Aoyama sect had been looking for the 3 Purities grass for many days. First come, first served. Gu Qing said calmly, "What the senior master should ask is why Big Brother Lo Huainan happened to show up in this city last night, instead of us." This sentence was very reasonable, but also very unreasonable. It was because Lo Huainan was already dead, so he couldn't answer the question. How do you explain the sword will of Aoyama? Renqianju withdrew his energy, but he was still staring into Zhao Lei's eyes, ready to strike her at any moment. He was a swordsman in the upper limit of the Huashan state. No matter how talented Zhao Lei was, she would have no choice but to accept her death. Those disciples of the Zhongzhou school also looked at the top floor, their eyes filled with alarm and anger. Zhao Lei didn't answer the question. What the Zhongzhou school heard in response was countless whistling sounds of swords. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A dozen sword lights illuminated the sky above Guiyun City. Chapter 213. Aoyama was a bit far from Yu County, so they arrived late. The leader was Elder Qi Yan of Shanghai Peak, followed by Guananshan, Gu Han, Ma Hua, Yao Songshan, and other disciples of Liangwang Peak, who were covered with frost dust. Looking at the situation in the Precious Ware Pavilion, Qi Yan said with a cold expression, "Your sect wants to besiege our peak master?" As soon as he finished speaking, more than 10 sword lights illuminated the building again. Flying swords of different styles hovered in the air with sharp wills of swords, and cracks of different depths appeared on the pillars. Those cultivators who participated in the auction didn't dare to stay any longer and left the building one after another. Zhang Yai walked in front of Qi Yan and explained. Yao Songshan, who was listening on the side, felt that it was very absurd. He shouted, "Who is Marshal Uncle Zhao? How could he do such a thing?" Lei Ilkyung looked around at the disciples of Zhongzhou school and scolded, "You're slandering me. Do you want to die?" Qi Yan said with a gloomy face, "I can understand the mood of your sect, but I hope you can be clear-headed." Zhao Lei appeared in Hohhot City because of the 3 purities grass. The whole cultivation world knew that she was looking for it. She was not a real immortal, so how could she predict that Lo Huainan would appear here? The sword will of Aoyama was judged by Grand Supreme Elder Shui Yu Nunnery himself. This matter has something to do with your Aoyama sect. Ren Qianju's face was even gloomier than Qi Yan's, and he said in a cold voice, "I want to know how you are going to explain this." The expressions on Guananshan's, Gu Han's and Ma Hua's faces had been grave the whole time. Hearing this, their faces grew even more unsightly, because they had probably guessed where the sword will of Aoyama came from. "I may know who it is, but it's hard to believe," Guananshan said in a heavy tone. Ren Qianju and Zhang Yai suddenly turned around, and countless eyes fell on him. "Who is it?" Qi Yan asked in a low voice. Guananshan was silent for a while and said, "It should be Lu Shisui." "That's right. This has nothing to do with Shenma Peak." A cold voice rang out. Tong Yen walks into the building in the morning light. He looked up at Zhao Lei and Gu Qing, who were standing by the railing on the top floor, and nodded slightly in greeting. Zhao Lei nodded and led Gu Qing into the house. Yao Songshan and Lei Ilkyung rode on their swords and stood guard outside the door. Tong Yen, Guananshan, and the other 2 looked at each other with grave expressions. The disciples of Aoyama were shocked, and the disciples of Zhongzhou school and the officials of the Pure Heaven Bureau were bewildered. The name Lu Shisui sounded familiar. Looking at Ren Qianju, Tong Yen asked, "Senior Master, have you found any trace of the bloody demon method?" Ren Qianju replied with narrowed eyes, "Yes." "How did you know?" After a moment of silence, Tong Yen said, "Then it must be him." Someone suddenly remembered, Lu Shisui? Is he the abandoned disciple of Aoyama? The disciples of Liangwang Peak in Aoyama fell silent, but the disciples of Zhongzhou school showed a shocked expression. This statement brought back many people's memories. Lu Shisui with natural Dao quality, like Zhao Lei and Zhuoruzhui, was the future disciple of Aoyama sect. After the first inherited sword competition, he entered Liangwang Peak and started to learn the sword work. As a result, he failed to control his greed when eliminating the demons at the Muddy River and took the devil pill in secret, and started to practice the deviant methods secretly. As a result, his cultivation state was destroyed, his meridians were broken, and he was expelled from Aoyama. This was a humiliating event for the Aoyama sect. Nobody in the cultivation circle dared mention it, but many people remembered it clearly. Hearing what Tong Yen said, they wondered if he was the one who killed Lo Huainan. It looks like he has indeed joined the deviant sections. He has used some unknown method to repair his meridians, and he has even joined Bulo Lin. Guananshan said with a grave expression, "This is indeed shocking." It became exceedingly quiet in the building. Nobody spoke for a long time. Ren Qianzhu felt something was not right. The ruins of the small courtyard contained the traces of the bloody demon method and the residual sword wills of Aoyama. Lu Shisui was the only person in Chaotian who could meet these two conditions at the same time. But why could the young disciples like Tong Yen and Guananshan think of this person without even going to the scene? It was then that the wind-moving sedan landed outside the building. Duke of He came from Zhaoga City. The imperial court had to make its stance known since such a significant event had occurred. Having heard Zhang Ei's report, Duke of He fell silent for a moment. He thought the reasoning of Tong Yen and Guananshan was reasonable, but he still had a few questions. Who was the other person? Of course, he should be the assassin of Bulolin. What sword did he use? Duke of He pressed while staring into Zhang Ei's eyes. Zhang Ei couldn't answer. All of a sudden, a white crane letter arrived through the morning sunlight. It was a letter from Shui Yu Nunnery. The great grandmaster remembered which sword the second sword will came from. That sword was called the First Sun. The young cultivation practitioners present didn't respond. Ren Qianzhu, Qi Yen and Duke of He had a sudden change of expression. They didn't say anything more. Standing outside the ruined courtyard, Guananshan didn't lower his head. He clenched his fists by his sides, his sleeves trembling slightly. He looked very sad. Gu Han and Ma Hua eyed each other and saw the shock and bewilderment in each other's eyes. What was going on? It was supposed to be a fake scheme. How could Lo Huainan be killed for Real? Is it possible that he made a mistake? Asked Gu Han. Ma Hua said in a trembling voice, "It's very unlikely. Even if something went wrong with Lu Shisui's control, how could cultivationist Luo, who has a high cultivation state, be killed? I can only think of one possibility. That is, Lu Shisui had already joined Bulo Lin's side, and he used our suggestion to launch an attack to kill cultivationist Luo." Guananshan didn't say anything, but his face grew paler. If this was the case, then Lo Huainan's death was his fault. Ma Hua's face was also very pale, looking like a big white steamed bun that had been left out overnight. His lips trembled slightly due to nervousness, and his voice became a bit unclear. "I thought of this method when you mentioned how to help Lu Shisui on Liangwang Peak, but I didn't expect it to end up like this." He said this while looking at Tong Yen. Tong Yen arched her eyebrows, but didn't say anything. Guananshan was a bit angry, wondering if Ma Hua was trying to shirk responsibility. This was something agreed upon by Liangwang Peak and cultivationist Luo, so it had nothing to do with Tong Yen. Looking at the officials of the Pure Heaven Bureau who were collecting the traces of devil flames in the ruins, Gu Han suddenly said, "I still don't believe that Lu Shisui has been possessed by the devil. There must be something wrong." Ma Hua asked anxiously, "Let's not worry about that for now. What should we do next?" "I'll report the cause and effect of this incident to my master, and I'll accept any punishment. I only hope we can find the clues and catch the murderer as soon as possible to comfort cultivationist Luo's soul in heaven." It seemed that Elder Ren was suspicious. "You push the blame to us first, and I'll explain later." Guananshan said this while looking at Tong Yen. After a moment of silence, Tong Yen said, "That's a good idea." He took out a small green glass bottle from his sleeve, crushed it into powder with his fingers, and sprinkled it on the ground in front of the ruins. What is this? Gu Han asked. Tong Yin said, This was my big brother's favorite toy. Gu Han didn't say anything more. The four of them stood in front of the ruins, remaining silent. A few fireworks suddenly shot up in the distance. It was the signal announcing the lifting of the ban, and the cultivation practitioners and residents of Hohhot City could come and go freely. Chapter 214. The clouds at the bottom of the cliff of Tianguang Peak were illuminated by the sun in silence, looking like a snowfield. Standing by the cliff's edge, Zhao Leia looked down at the scenery. She suddenly had an urge to go to White Town, but she soon discarded this idea. A sigh broke out. She turned around and bowed to the tall figure, saying, Greetings, great sect master. The sect master of Oyama stood in front of the stone tablet with his hands clasped behind his back, saying, Is this the first time you've come to the top of Tianguang Peak? Zhao Leia's line of sight moved up and fell on the scabbard. Yes, she said in a low voice, suppressing the shock in her heart. Back then, I thought you were still too young, even though you were the second disciple of youngest senior uncle. I thought it would be better to tell you about many things later. But now I think it's inappropriate. It's because you're not used to asking for other people's opinions before doing something. The sect master turned around and walked to her side, looking down at the vast sea of clouds at the bottom of the cliff. The inherited heaven sword is only a scabbard? Zhao Lei asked. It's meaningless even if I ask about it. The sect master said, This so-called secret is indeed meaningless. I invited you here today mainly to ask about the death of Lo Huainan. It has nothing to do with me, said Zhao Lei. The sect master said, Jing Jiu might not have died. Why did you insist on his death? It would be disrespectful to say that it had nothing to do with her at this moment. Zhao Lei said after a moment of silence. He wanted Jing Jiu to die, and I wanted him to die. Nothing can be hidden from everyone, said the sect master. Zhao Lei said, For example, you've all guessed it, but you didn't do anything. I've waited for you for 3 years. Since you didn't do anything, I'll do it myself. The sect master said, Lo Huainan has performed so well in the last 3 years that even I'm a bit shaken. But I don't have any evidence. Zhao Lei said, Zhongzhou School doesn't have any evidence either. The sect leader said, That's right. You've designed this trap very well. Even if someone suspects you, they won't be able to find any evidence, and the people you find will never betray you. Neither the precious treehouse nor royal concubine who had any reason or courage to betray Shinma Peak. The sect leader continued, But have you ever thought that this will affect our relationship with the Cloud Dream Mountain? Zhao Lei said, The last one was Tong Yin. It was a fight between the disciples of Zhongzhou School. The sect leader said, If someone really guessed something, there would be a problem. We can use the words people will be plunged into misery and suffering. When the war broke out between the Aoyama sect and the Zhongzhou School, the history Jing Jiu had deduced in Zhaoga City would take place. Zhao Lei said, I didn't think that much. Or are you too lazy to think about it? That official is called Shi Fengqian? That's his name. His fear of you is not entirely unreasonable. The sect leader suddenly asked, Have you already guessed who he is? Zhao Lei remained silent for a long time. She didn't answer his question, but asked, Whose sword is the first child's sword? The sect leader didn't answer her question either. It was not that simple. Standing by the cliff's edge, Zhao Lei thought to herself while listening to the cheerful cries of the monkeys on Shinma Peak. After meeting royal concubine Hu that night, the emperor asked Gongfeng Jin to give the first child's sword to her, indicating that it was not a simple matter. The first child's sword was very powerful, and it was as powerful as the thoughtless sword in her hands. That was why she could wound Lo Huainan severely that night. Gu Qing came to the cliff's edge and said in a low voice, I've found out. It's the sword of the hidden swordsman. Feeling surprised, Zhao Leu asked with raised eyebrows, "The one on the ocean?" The third Grandmaster of the mysterious dark sect hid deep underground and wasn't good at riding the sword. The grandson of the Emperor should be near Ozawa with the turtle shell on his back, so it could only be that fairy swordsman in the heavenly arrival state. Gu Qing nodded with a grave expression on his face. It was rumored that the fairy swordsman in the heavenly arrival state, who was forced to imprison himself on the foggy island by the sword formation of Aoyama, had something to do with the current godly swordsman of West Ocean. What did the Emperor intend to do by killing someone with the help of a sword? Was his target the Western Sea Sword School or Bulolin? Or did he intend to intimidate Zhongzhou School by cooperating with Aoyama? Thinking of all this, Zhao Leu's face grew paler and she coughed twice. She was wounded severely in the battle to kill Lo Huainan, and she consumed a great deal of Zhen Yuan to hide her wound in the precious warehouse, so she was very weak at the moment. Gu Qing glanced at her, feeling worried. "Send a message to the 9 Peaks that I'm going to stay behind closed doors." Zhao Leu took a look at the north, and then turned around and walked toward the manor cave. Gu Qing called young Yuan over and told him a few things, saying, "I'm going to stay behind closed doors as well. Remember to wake me up when the plum meeting starts." The cultivation tournament couldn't take place in the snowland because of the cold fog, so the plum meeting couldn't be held. The day the plum meeting started meant that the cold fog would disperse. Young Yuan understood what Jingzhu meant, and vaguely guessed what they were going to do. "I won't tell the other side," he said uneasily. Gu Qing rubbed Jingzhu's head with a smile, saying nothing. Thinking of this, young Yuan said sentimentally, "I didn't expect it to be Lu Shui. It turns out that he hasn't forgotten Senior Master Jing. As I said, he is the big brother of our Shenhua Peak." Gu Qing said to him, "And please ask the other side to keep an eye on the village. I don't want my master to be angry when he comes back." Young Yuan felt a headache coming on, asking, "Are you sure they will help us?" Gu Qing didn't say anything, walking toward the forest at the foot of the cliff. He didn't stay behind closed doors in the manor cave, but in the small hut in the forest where he had lived for a long time. The monkeys in the forest cried out to welcome him. Gu Qing remained silent. Back when Lu Shui secretly took the devil pill, he was locked up in the fiend prison by the Shangda Peak and tortured day and night. Something bad was about to happen to him. Jingzhu remembered what Jingzhu told him before he left, so he wrote a note to the monkeys and asked them to get help. The next day, Lu Shui was released. It wasn't until now that the disciples of Liangwang Peak thought it was the sect master's order. At the time, Gu Qing didn't know who did it, but he had communicated with the monkeys over the years, so he knew which peak they went to at the time. When Zhao Leu was assassinated, the wife of the sect master of the center sect came to Aoyama to explain the situation. Zhao Leu didn't die that time. Lu Shui was an abandoned disciple of Aoyama, but Lo Huainan was dead. As such, the sect master of Aoyama went to Cloud Dream Mountain in person. It was the first time in 200 years. A few days later, the Zhongzhou School and the Aoyama sect jointly issued a decree, confirming that Lu Shui was the real murderer of Lo Huainan, and requesting all the practitioners in the world to help track him down. As long as they could kill or capture Lu Shui, or provide accurate information and help the Zhongzhou School and the Aoyama sect kill or capture Lu Shui, they would be rewarded by the two sections. As the leader of the Orthodox Cultivation Circle, and for such a significant event, the rewards offered by the Zhongzhou School and the Aoyama sect were naturally quite impressive. 2 high-level magic methods and 2 magic treasures of the heavenly state. The portraits of Lu Shui appeared on the city gates, on the streets, in the restaurants, and in all the places in Chaotian. His portrait was even on the godly boats heading to the distant ocean. His appearance, temperament, and characteristics of his magic methods were well known in the world. In his cultivation state, he was not qualified to be called a hidden swordsman. In fact, he would be no different from the other 3 hidden swordsmen. He would be hunted down for the rest of his life, unable to breathe for a moment, and unable to see the sun again. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.